I never understood why my husband became so distant after my diagnosis, until the day he packed his bags. Now watching him on my doorstep, tears streaming down his face after news of my lottery win hit the local paper. Everything made perfect sense. Some people only love you when you have something they want, health, or in this case, wealth. The magnolia-scented spring air drifted through our bedroom window as I sat on the edge of our king-sized bed, the phone still clutched in my trembling hand. The doctor's words echoed in my mind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Stage 2 breast cancer. Good prognosis with immediate treatment. Surgery followed by chemotherapy. Farrah? What did they say? Adam stood in the doorway, his tall frame casting a long shadow across our cream carpet. His voice carried an edge of impatience rather than concern, his eyes not meeting mine, but glancing repeatedly at his watch. We had dinner reservations at Bellamy's, the upscale restaurant where we'd celebrated our 9th wedding anniversary just 3 months earlier. I looked up at him, this man I'd shared a life with for nearly a decade, trying to find the words. How do you tell your husband, your supposed partner in sickness and in health, that your body has betrayed you, that the cells inside your breast have turned against you, multiplying with a vengeance that would require poison to stop? It's cancer, I finally said, the words hanging in the air between us like a physical presence. Stage 2. The doctor says with treatment the prognosis is good, but cancer? Adam interrupted, his voice a strange mixture of shock and something else I couldn't quite identify. Are you sure? As if I would joke about such a thing. As if the biopsy results that had kept me awake for 3 nights straight while waiting were something I might have misinterpreted. Yes, Adam, I'm sure. My voice steadier than I expected. I need surgery, followed by chemotherapy. Dr. Wilson wants to move quickly. He ran his hand through his perfectly styled dark hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing but now seemed performative. What about the Moreland Project? Of all the questions he could have asked, about my feelings, my fears, my treatment options, he asked about work. The Moreland Project was a major design undertaking for our architectural firm, one I'd spent months developing as lead architect. It was important, certainly, but in that moment, I'll need to step back, I said, surprise giving way to the first flicker of disappointment. Mark can take lead. He knows the vision. Adam frowned, pacing, the bedroom we'd redesigned together just last year, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor where the carpet ended. Mark lacks your eye for detail. The client specifically asked for you. I have cancer, Adam. The words felt strange on my tongue, still new and terrifying. My body is trying to kill me. The Moreland Project will have to understand. He stopped, pacing, his expression shifting to something that looked like sympathy, but didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course, you're right. I'm sorry. He glanced at his watch again. We should probably cancel dinner. You think? The sarcasm slipped out before I could stop it. He reached for his phone. I'll call them. You should rest. I watched him step into the hallway, his voice dropping to a murmur as he spoke with the restaurant. No comforting touch, no embrace, no, we'll get through this together. Just practical arrangements and a subtle retreat. That night, as I lay awake staring at the coffered ceiling we'd splurged on during the renovation, Adam slept soundly beside me, his breathing deep and even. The distance between us, though only inches of Egyptian cotton, suddenly felt vast. I didn't know it then, but that distance would only grow in the coming weeks. The first changes were subtle. Adam began sleeping in the guest room, claiming my restlessness kept him awake, and he needed proper sleep to hold things together at the firm. He started coming home later, citing increased workload now that I was on medical leave. Our conversations, once flowing with easy familiarity, became stilted and brief, focused on practical matters rather than emotional support. My surgery was scheduled quickly, a lumpectomy that would remove the tumor while preserving as much breast tissue as possible. The night before the procedure, I found myself alone in our kitchen at 2 a.m., anxiety keeping sleep at bay. The sound of the front door opening startled me. Adam appeared in the kitchen doorway, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his jacket. "You're still up," he said, more statement than question. "Surgery tomorrow," I replied, not asking where he'd been or why he smelled like someone else. Some questions feel dangerous once formed into words. "Right." He nodded, opening the refrigerator and grabbing a bottle of water. "What time should we leave?" "We need to be there at 6 a.m. He took a long drink, then set the bottle down on the marble countertop. "I'll set an alarm." No words of reassurance, no acknowledgement of my fear, just logistics. The morning of surgery dawned cold and gray, matching my mood. Adam drove in silence, the radio filling the space where conversation should have been. At the hospital, he helped with the admitting paperwork, then settled into a chair in the waiting room, immediately, pulling out his laptop. "This might take a few hours," I said, watching him set up his mobile office. "You don't have to stay the whole time." Something flashed across his face. Relief? "I've got the Peterson presentation to finish anyway. Call me when you're in recovery. My..." Sister Stella arrived just as they were preparing to take me back, her red hair flying wild around her face, eyes bright with concern. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." She embraced me tightly, careful of the IV in my arm. "How are you feeling?" "Scared," I admitted, the word easier to say to her than to my own husband. She squeezed my hand. "That's normal. But you're strong, Farrah. Stronger than you realize." From the corner of my eye, I saw Adam shift uncomfortably in his chair. "Adam." Stella nodded in his direction, her tone cooler than the spring air outside. My sister had never been his biggest fan, though she'd tried for my sake. "You're heading in with her, right?" He cleared his throat. "Actually, they only allow one person, and since you're here now..." The lie came so easily to him. The hospital had no such policy. Stella's eyebrows rose, but before she could speak, a nurse appeared. "We're ready for you, Mrs. Sullivan." As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I glanced back to see Adam already returning to his laptop, his attention fully absorbed by the screen. Stella walked alongside my gurney until they stopped her at the surgical wing doors, her expression a mixture of love for me and barely concealed contempt for the man who should have been in her place. The surgery was successful, the margins clear, though the sentinel lymph node showed some cancer cells, upgrading my diagnosis slightly. Chemotherapy would definitely be necessary. I woke in recovery to find Stella by my side, her smile warm despite the worry in her eyes. "Where's Adam?" I asked, my voice rough from the intubation. "He had to go back to the office," she said carefully. "Something about a client emergency." Of course he did. The pattern continued through my recovery at home. Adam became a ghost in our house, present in theory but absent in all the ways that mattered. He hired a home health aide to help me during the day, claiming work demands prevented him from taking time off. The aide, a kind-hearted woman named Marta, provided more emotional support in her 8-hour shifts than Adam did in his brief appearances. My friend Daisy visited regularly, bringing homemade soups and fresh flowers. "Has Adam taken any time off?" she asked one afternoon, arranging tulips in a crystal vase as I rested on the living room sofa. "He's very busy," I replied, the excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. Daisy's expression remained neutral, but her eyes revealed her thoughts. Reed would drag himself to work on his deathbed, but even he took 2 weeks off when I had my gallbladder removed. I changed the subject. 2 weeks after surgery, I had my first appointment with the oncologist to discuss chemotherapy. Adam had a meeting he couldn't reschedule, so Stella accompanied me instead. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Martinez, a petite woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, laid out my treatment plan. 16 weeks of chemotherapy, followed by radiation. "You'll likely lose your hair," she explained gently. "And there may be other side effects: fatigue, nausea, potential fertility impacts." I nodded, trying to absorb it all while fear crept up my spine. "What about work?" I asked, thinking of the firm, of the Moreland project that Adam was so concerned about. "Some patients can work part-time during treatment," Dr. Martinez said. "But listen to your body. Pushing yourself too hard can compromise your immune system." Stella squeezed my hand. "Work can wait. Getting better can't." That evening, I sat Adam down in our living room to discuss the treatment plan. He listened, nodding occasionally, his eyes darting to his phone whenever it buzzed with notifications. "I'll probably lose my hair," I said, watching his face carefully. "The doctor says there are good wigs available, but whatever you need." He interrupted, not unkindly, but with the air of someone checking off a task list. "We have good insurance." "It's not just about the wig, Adam." My voice caught. "I'm scared about how different I'll look, how different I'll feel." He reached across the sofa and patted my hand awkwardly. "You'll still be you." But would I? And would that be enough for him? The question lingered unasked. My first chemotherapy session was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Adam had an unavoidable client meeting, so Gemma, my oldest friend since college, took me instead. As we sat in the infusion center, the toxic cocktail designed to save my life dripping slowly into my veins, Gemma chatted about everything and nothing, keeping my mind off the poison and what was to come. "Have you thought about a wig?" she asked. "We could make it fun. Try styles you've never dared before. Always wanted to be a redhead? Now's your chance." I smiled despite myself. "Maybe something wildly different. Platinum blonde?" "You'd rock it," she assured me, then hesitated. "How's Adam handling everything?" I stared at the IV in my arm. "He's adjusting." Gemma's silence spoke volumes. The side effects hit 3 days. Later. Violent nausea that left me curled around the toilet bowl. Bone-deep fatigue that made even lifting my head from the pillow a Herculean task. And a strange metallic taste that made everything I tried to eat taste like copper pennies. Adam moved permanently into the guest room then. "You need your rest," he insisted, "and I'll just disturb you if I'm getting up for work." A week later, clumps of my chestnut hair began coming out in the shower. I watched the strands circle the drain, tears mixing with the water streaming down my face. That evening, I asked Adam to help me shave my head, to take control of at least this one aspect of what was happening to me. "I don't think I can," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe Stella or Daisy can help?" I called Stella, who came immediately with clippers borrowed from her husband. She sat me in a kitchen chair draped with a sheet and gently, lovingly, removed what remained of my hair, telling me how beautiful my perfectly shaped head was, how my eyes looked even more striking now. When she finished, I studied my reflection. In the handheld mirror, a stranger stared back, pale and alien, skull-like without the frame of hair I'd had my entire life. Adam walked into the kitchen, stopped short at the sight of me, and mumbled something about needing to make a call before retreating to his office. That night, I heard him on the phone through the wall, his voice low but intense. "I can't do this. It's not what I signed up for. She's not even herself anymore." The words cut deeper than any surgeon's scalpel. 2 days later, I was sitting at the kitchen island attempting to eat dry toast, one of the few things that didn't immediately trigger nausea, when Adam appeared in the doorway, a suitcase in hand. Need to talk, Farrah." I stared at the suitcase in Adam's hand, the expensive leather weekender we'd bought together during our trip to Italy 3 years earlier. My stomach dropped not from the chemo this time, but from the unmistakable meaning of packed bags on a Tuesday morning. Talk? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. About what? He set the suitcase down with deliberate care, as if the sound of it hitting our travertine floor might shatter something beyond repair. Perhaps it already had. This isn't working, Farrah, he said, his voice carrying a practiced tone that told me he'd rehearsed this speech. I've tried, but I can't. I'm not built for this kind of situation. I clutched my bathrobe tighter around my frail body, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I looked. Pale, bald, 20 pounds lighter than when we'd renewed our vows on our 5th anniversary. What kind of situation? I asked, though I knew. The in sickness part of our vows? He flinched, the first genuine reaction I'd seen from him in weeks. That's not fair. Not fair? I almost laughed. What wasn't fair was the cancer eating away at my body. What wasn't fair was losing my hair, my energy, my sense of taste. What wasn't fair was my husband, the man who had promised to stand by me through anything, now standing before me with a packed bag. Then explain it to me, Adam, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Help me understand what could possibly be more important than supporting your wife through cancer treatment. He looked at the floor, the wall, the ceiling, anywhere, but at me. I'm not leaving because of your cancer. It's more complicated than that. Then uncomplicate it for me. He sighed, finally meeting my eyes. We've been growing apart for a while now, Farrah. Even before the diagnosis. The firm, the Moreland project. It all made it easy to ignore, but this situation has forced me to face the truth. I'm not happy. I haven't been for some time. The toast I'd been struggling to eat turned to ash in my mouth. Growing apart? Was that what he called it when one person silently withdraws while the other remains fully committed? And my cancer diagnosis was just... What? Convenient timing for you to finally admit it? His jaw tightened. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Adam? Because from where I'm sitting, weak from chemotherapy, fighting for my life, it looks very much like you're abandoning me when I need you most. He ran his hand through his hair, that familiar gesture now infuriating in its familiarity. I can't be the person you need right now. I've tried, but I just can't. You deserve someone who can support you properly through this. And you've decided that person isn't you. It wasn't a question. I've already talked to Mark about buying out my share of the firm, he continued, as if discussing a business transaction rather than the dismantling of our life together. The paperwork should be finalized next week. The house is in both our names, so we'll need to figure that out eventually, but I think you should stay here during your treatment. How considerate. He wouldn't make me move while undergoing chemotherapy. Should I be grateful? Where will you go? I asked, hating that I still cared. Reed has a rental property that's vacant. I'll stay there until I figure out next steps. Reed, Daisy's husband, so they knew already. Had everyone in our social circle been discussing my husband's imminent departure while bringing me casseroles and sympathy cards? I stood up, gripping the edge of the counter for support as a wave of dizziness hit me. A common side effect of the chemo, along with the nausea and fatigue. Adam took a half step forward as if to steady me, then stopped himself. Even now he couldn't bring himself to touch me. You should sit, he said, concern flickering briefly across his face. You look pale. I'm in chemotherapy, Adam. Pale is my new normal. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Just like being abandoned by my husband is apparently my new normal too, he winced. I'll continue to support you financially, of course, and I can drive you to appointments if Stella or your friends aren't available. As if being a chauffeur of last resort somehow mitigated his betrayal. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time saw not the man I'd fallen in love with, but a stranger wearing a familiar face. How had I missed the hardening of his eyes, the coldness that had nothing to do with the blue of his irises? When had his handsome features become so devoid of compassion? "I don't want your money," I said quietly, "and I certainly don't need your pity rides." What I needed was my husband, but clearly he checked out weeks ago. Adam picked up his suitcase again, his knuckles white around the handle. "I'm sorry, Farrah. I truly am. I never wanted to hurt you. And yet here we are." He hesitated, as if there were more to say, then nodded once and turned toward the door. I watched him walk away, his shoulders straight, steps unhurried. No dramatic pause at the threshold, no last glance back. Just the quiet click of the front door closing, the period at the end of a 10-year sentence. I sat alone in our kitchen, my kitchen now, surrounded by evidence of a shared life that had apparently meant more to me than to him. The Viking range. We'd splurged on because Adam loved to cook on weekends. The Italian espresso machine that had been our 5th anniversary gift to each other. The framed black and white photographs from our honeymoon in Greece that lined the hallway. All of it suddenly felt like props on an abandoned stage, the play having ended while I was still reciting my lines. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at nothing before the sound of a key in the lock jolted me back to awareness. For one absurd moment, I thought Adam had returned, had realized the terrible mistake he was making. Instead, Stella burst through the door, grocery bags in hand, her face flushed from exertion or emotion. I couldn't tell which. "That absolute bastard," she spat, dropping the bags on the counter. "I passed him on the road. He couldn't even look me in the eye." So she knew. Of course she did. My sister had always seen through Adam's charm to the selfishness beneath, though she'd kept her opinions mostly to herself out of respect for my choices. "He left," I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue, similar to how "I have cancer" had felt just weeks earlier. New and terrifying realities that my brain struggled to process. Stella wrapped her arms around me, careful of the tender port in my chest where the chemo drugs entered my bloodstream. "I'm so sorry, Farrah. So sorry." I felt numb, disconnected from my body in the moment. "He said we've been growing apart, that he's not happy." Stella pulled back to look at me, her green eyes, so like our mother's, blazing with protective fury. "What he is a coward, a selfish, spineless coward, who doesn't deserve a single one of your tears." But the tears came anyway, hot and fast, the emotional dam breaking now that Adam was gone, and only my sister remained to witness my collapse. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the partner who had promised forever and delivered only, until it got difficult, for the future I'd imagined that now lay in ruins at my feet. Stella held me through it all, murmuring soothing words, her own tears falling into my non-existent hair. When the sobs finally subsided, leaving me hollow and exhausted, she guided me to the sofa in the living room, tucking a soft blanket around me. "What am I going to do?" I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. Stella's expression hardened, with determination. "First, you're going to beat cancer. Then you're going to rebuild your life, a better one without that selfish jerk." She squeezed my hand. "And you won't do it alone. I'm here. Daisy and Gemma are here. We've got you, Farrah." He said Reed knew about him leaving. Stella nodded grimly. "Reed tried to talk him out of it. So did Mark from your firm. No one could believe he was actually going through with this. So everyone had known except me." The realization stung, adding humiliation to the already potent cocktail of grief and betrayal. "I feel so stupid," I admitted. "So blind." "You're not stupid," Stella insisted fiercely. "You're loyal. You believe in your vows. That's not a character flaw, Farrah. It's a strength. Adam's the one who should be ashamed, not you." I wasn't sure I believed her, but I nodded anyway. The chemo fatigue was creeping up again, making my eyelids heavy and my thoughts sluggish. Rest, Stella urged, seeing my exhaustion. I'll be here when you wake up. I'm not going anywhere. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I couldn't help but think how those were exactly the words Adam should have said, but never did. The days following Adam's departure blurred together in a haze of chemo side effects and grief. Each morning, I'd wake up reaching for a husband who wasn't there. The cold emptiness of the king-sized bed a cruel reminder of dual losses, my health and my marriage. Stella stayed with me that first week, sleeping in the guest room Adam had claimed during my initial treatment. She made sure I ate when food was merely a chore, drove me to my second chemo session, and fielded the endless calls and texts from concerned friends who had heard about Adam's departure. "No, she's not up for visitors right now," I'd hear her say in hushed tones from the hallway, or, "She's resting, but I'll tell her you called." My fierce protector, shielding me from well-meaning but exhausting sympathy. On day 9 of Adam's absence, yes, I was counting, Daisy appeared at my door with a casserole and an expression that hovered between anger and uncertainty. I didn't know if you'd want to see me, she said, standing awkwardly on the porch. Given that Reed knew, I stepped back to let her in. "You're not responsible for your husband's actions, or mine." Her relief was palpable as she followed me into the kitchen, setting the casserole on the counter. Reed tried to talk him out of it, Farrah. We all did. All? I turned to face her, suddenly alert. Who exactly is all, Daisy? She looked down, fingers nervously tracing patterns on the marble countertop. Me? Reed? Mark from your firm? A few others from your social circle. Adam had been talking about leaving for weeks. He'd made up his mind. But Reed thought if enough people confronted him, he might reconsider. The betrayal deepened like a knife twisting in my chest. Weeks. Adam had been planning his exit for weeks, discussing it with our friends while I fought. For my life, oblivious to the social drama unfolding around me. When? My voice was surprisingly steady. When did he first mention leaving? Daisy's discomfort was visible, but I needed answers more than I needed to spare her feelings. The night after your diagnosis, she admitted finally. He called Reed, very upset, said he wasn't equipped to handle this kind of crisis, that your careers had already been creating distance between you. The night after my diagnosis, while I'd lain awake terrified about surgery and cancer and an uncertain future, my husband had been plotting his escape. Did he mention someone else? The question that had been lurking in the corners of my mind finally pushed its way out. Daisy's eyes widened. What? No, at least not to us. He just kept saying he couldn't handle the stress, that he'd been unhappy for a while, and this was forcing him to face it. She hesitated. Do you think there's someone else? The perfume on his jacket that night, before my surgery, the late-night phone calls, the rapid withdrawal of physical affection, all the signs had been there, but I'd been too consumed by my cancer battle to connect them. I don't know, I said honestly. But I intend to find out. That afternoon, after Daisy left, I did something I'd never done in 10 years of marriage. I called Hank Miller, an old college friend who'd become a private detective. We'd kept in loose contact over the years, occasional birthday messages and Christmas cards, but nothing close. Still, when I explained my situation, he agreed to meet me the next day. Hank arrived at precisely 2 p.m., looking much the same as he had in college, tall and lanky with observant hazel eyes and a quiet demeanor that made people underestimate his intelligence. You look good, Farrah, he said as I let him in. The lie so kind I almost smiled. I did not look good. I looked like a cancer patient whose husband had just abandoned her, gaunt, pale, and bald beneath the silk scarf Stella had tied around. My head? No, I don't, I replied, leading him to the living room. But thanks for the attempt. He settled into the armchair across from me, his expression turning professional. So you want me to look into your husband's activities? I need to know if there's someone else, Hank. I twisted the wedding ring I still wore out of habit. It won't change the outcome. We're done regardless. But I need the truth. Hank nodded, understanding without judgment. Start from the beginning. When did you first notice changes in his behavior? For the next hour, I laid out the timeline. Adam's gradual withdrawal after my diagnosis, the late nights, the distance, the perfume, all culminating in his departure 9 days earlier. Hank took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, in his methodical way. What about joint finances? He asked. Any unusual withdrawals or transfers before he left? I hadn't even thought to check. Cancer and chemo had consumed all my attention, leaving little energy for financial vigilance. I don't know. We have separate accounts for personal expenses, but a joint account for household costs. And investments together, of course. You should look into that right away, Hank advised. Even if he's not involved with someone else, people planning to leave marriages often start moving assets. The suggestion sent a chill through me. Would Adam have gone that far? Stolen from me while I was fighting cancer? After Hank left with Adam's photo and a list of his usual haunts, I dragged my laptop to the sofa and logged into our online banking accounts. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past month, Adam had been systematically transferring money from our joint account to his personal account, small amounts that wouldn't immediately raise flags, but which added up to nearly $45,000. More disturbingly, he'd liquidated his portion of our investment portfolio just 3 days before leaving, withdrawing almost $200,000 without a word to me. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the transaction history. This wasn't just abandonment, it was calculated financial betrayal. He'd been planning his escape route while sitting beside my hospital bed. I called Stella immediately. I need a lawyer, I said when she answered. A good one. Specifically, a divorce attorney who won't be intimidated by Adam's legal connections. What happened? Her concern was immediate. He's been moving money, Stella. Lots of it. While I was throwing up from chemo and losing my hair, my husband was emptying our accounts. Her stream of creative profanity would have made a sailor blush. When she finally calmed down, she said, I know someone. Caroline Winters. She specializes in high-conflict divorces, and she's absolutely ruthless when the situation calls for it. Perfect. Set it up as soon as possible. 2 days later, I sat in Caroline Winters' sleek downtown office, surrounded by the trappings of legal success, law degrees from prestigious universities, awards for excellence, photographs with well-known judges. Caroline herself was a formidable presence, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Sullivan, I've reviewed your financial records and preliminary information, she began, her voice brisk but not unkind. What your husband has done is not just morally reprehensible, it's legally actionable. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Can we get the money back? We can certainly try. The timing works in our favor. Courts don't look kindly on spouses who drain accounts immediately before leaving, especially when the other spouse is seriously ill. She leaned forward. But there's something else you should know. Something my paralegal discovered while doing background research on your husband. My stomach tightened with dread. What is it? Caroline slid a folder across her desk. Inside was a printout of a real estate listing, a luxury condo in South Beach, recently purchased by a limited liability company. Next to it was a corporate filing for that LLC, listing Adam Sullivan as the manager. Your husband bought a $1.2 million condo in Florida 3 weeks ago through an LLC created just days after your cancer diagnosis. The purchase was completed the day before he left you. The room seemed to tilt sideways as the implications sank in. But where did he get that kind of money? We don't have that much liquid cash, even with what he took from our accounts. That, Caroline said grimly, is exactly what we need to find out. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from Hank. Found something. Need to meet in person. Your house, 7 p.m.? The hours until 7 p.m. crawled by with excruciating slowness. When Hank finally arrived, his typically calm expression was troubled. "You should sit down for this, Farrah." I sank onto the sofa, bracing myself. "Just tell me." Hank pulled out his tablet and opened a photo gallery. I followed Adam for the past few days. His routine was fairly consistent: the firm, the gym, Reed's rental property where he's staying. But yesterday he drove to this address. He showed me a photo of an upscale apartment building downtown, one I recognized as having been completed about a year earlier. He went up to the 15th floor and stayed for 3 hours. Hank swiped to the next image, this one showing Adam, embracing a willowy blonde woman in the building's lobby. Her name is Gemma Carlton. She's a real estate agent with Prestige Properties. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. Gemma. My friend Gemma. The same Gemma who had taken me to chemo when Adam was too busy. The same Gemma who had helped me pick out headscarves when my hair began falling out. The same Gemma who had held my hand through the worst of the nausea and promised everything would be okay. "There's more," Hank said gently, swiping to additional photos showing Adam and Gemma holding hands at a restaurant, walking arm in arm through a park, kissing in the front seat of his car. "How long?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt lined with broken glass. Based on what I could gather from the building's doorman, who's quite chatty, they've been seeing each other for at least 6 months. Well before your diagnosis. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Of betrayal not just by my husband, but by a woman I'd considered a friend. A woman who had looked me in the eye, day after day, offering support and comfort while sleeping with my husband behind my back. The duel. Betrayal was almost too much to bear. I leaned forward, suddenly unable to catch my breath, the room spinning around me. "Farrah?" Hank's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Farrah, I'm calling an ambulance." As consciousness slipped away, my last coherent thought was that perhaps the cancer wasn't the thing trying hardest to kill me after all. The hospital ceiling came into focus slowly, the fluorescent lights too harsh for my pounding head. The steady beep of monitoring equipment provided a rhythmic backdrop to my confusion. Why was I here? The last thing I remembered was sitting in my living room with Hank, looking at photos of Adam and Gemma. The memory hit me with physical force, making me gasp. A nurse appeared in my field of vision, her expression professionally concerned. "Mrs. Sullivan? You're at Memorial Hospital. You collapsed at home. Your friend called an ambulance." I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw. The nurse offered a plastic cup of water with a straw, holding it while I took small sips. "What happened?" I finally managed. "Your blood pressure dropped dangerously low, and you were severely dehydrated. The oncology team has been consulted, given your ongoing treatment." She adjusted something on my IV line. "Dr. Wilson will be in shortly." I closed my eyes, processing. The physical collapse was almost a relief compared to the emotional one that had preceded it. My husband and my friend. Together. For months. While I battled cancer. The door opened, and Stella burst in, her face tight with worry. "Farrah, thank God you're awake. Hank called me. He's in the waiting room. What happened?" As the words spilled out, Adam's affair with Gemma, the financial betrayal, the secret condo purchase, Stella's expression morphed from concern to white-hot fury. "That absolute monster!" she hissed, gripping the bedrail so tightly her knuckles went white. "Both of them. After everything you've been through. Mrs. Sullivan." Dr. Wilson entered, chart in hand, her normally warm manner slightly rigid. "You've given us quite a scare." The examination was brief, but thorough. The verdict: extreme stress combined with chemotherapy side effects and poor nutrition had created a perfect storm. My immune system, already compromised by treatment, couldn't handle the additional burden of emotional trauma. "We need to consider adjusting your treatment plan," Dr. Wilson said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Your body can't fight cancer effectively under these conditions. I can't stop chemo, I protested weakly. The cancer won't wait for my personal life to improve. No one's suggesting stopping treatment entirely, but perhaps a modified protocol, additional supportive medications. She paused, choosing her words carefully. And I'm going to strongly recommend psychological support. Cancer is hard enough. Without additional stressors. Additional stressors. Such a clinical term for having your life exploded from multiple directions simultaneously. After Dr. Wilson left, Stella helped me sit up, adjusting pillows behind my back. You're coming to stay with me when they discharge you, she announced. No arguments. I can't impose. It's not an imposition. It's what family does. Her eyes welled with tears. Let me do this, Farrah. Please. I couldn't protect you from Adam's betrayal or from cancer, but I can at least make sure you're not alone through it. Too exhausted to argue, I nodded. Just until I'm stronger. The hospital kept me for 3 days, pumping me full of fluids and nutrients, monitoring my heart function, and adjusting my medications. My oncologist conferred with specialists, developing a modified chemotherapy regimen that would hopefully be easier on my depleted system while still effectively fighting the cancer. Adam didn't call, didn't visit, didn't even send a message asking if I was all right. His absence spoke volumes about how completely he had detached himself from my life and well-being. Gemma, on the other hand, had the audacity to send flowers, a tasteful arrangement, of lilies with a card expressing concern and hopes for my speedy recovery. No mention of her betrayal, no acknowledgement of her role in my collapse. Stella intercepted the delivery, read the card, and promptly dumped the entire arrangement in the hospital trash. You don't need her fake sympathy, my sister said when I asked about the commotion I'd heard in the hallway. Not now, not ever. On the afternoon of my 3rd day in the hospital, Caroline Winters appeared in my room, briefcase in hand, looking as impeccable as she had in her office despite the institutional setting. I don't typically make hospital visits, she said, pulling a chair close to my bed. But given the circumstances, I thought you should know right away. We've filed for an emergency freeze on all your joint accounts and investments. A judge granted the order this morning. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of something other than despair, a small spark of satisfaction. So Adam can't take any more money? Not from your joint assets, no. And we've initiated proceedings to recover what he's already transferred. She opened her briefcase, removing a slim folder. But that's not the only reason I'm here. My investigative team has been looking into the Florida condo purchase. We needed to determine where the money came from, since it exceeded what he'd taken from your joint funds. I steeled myself. And? The purchase was partially financed through a mortgage, but the down payment, nearly $500,000, came from an account at First Meridian Bank, opened 6 months ago under the name of the LLC he created. Something cold settled in my stomach. We don't bank at First Meridian. No, you don't. But Prestige Properties does. It's where they maintain their commission escrow accounts. The implication hung in the air between us. Are you saying Gemma stole from her employer to help Adam buy this condo? Caroline shook her head. Not exactly. We believe, and we're still gathering evidence to confirm this, that Gemma Carlton has been diverting portions of real estate commissions to this account. Possibly by manipulating transaction records to show lower sales prices to her firm while collecting the full commission directly from clients. That's illegal, isn't it? Highly. It's fraud, embezzlement, possibly tax evasion. Caroline's expression was grim but satisfied. If our suspicions are correct, your husband and his girlfriend could be facing criminal charges in addition to civil liability. The information should have brought satisfaction, I suppose. Instead, I felt hollow, thinking of the woman who had held my hand through chemo, A thief. The man I'd built a life with. A criminal conspirator. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly exhausted again. "Now we continue building our case. I've engaged forensic accountants to trace all financial transactions. I've also filed a formal complaint with the Real Estate Commission regarding Ms. Carlton's suspicious activities." Caroline closed her folder with precision. "In the meantime, focus on your health, Mrs. Sullivan. Let me handle the legal battle." After she left, I lay back against the pillows, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to curl into a ball and disappear, to let the weight of betrayal and illness crush me completely. It would be easier than fighting. Fighting cancer. Fighting for what was rightfully mine. But another part of me, a part I barely recognized, simmered with something new. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Something cooler, more focused. A determination that had nothing to do with saving my marriage and everything to do with saving myself. When Hank visited that evening, I was sitting up in bed, a legal pad balanced on my knees, making notes. "You look better," he observed, setting a small potted plant, not flowers, thankfully, on the windowsill. "More present." "I need everything you can find on Adam and Gemma," I said without preamble. "Their schedules, their habits, the places they go. I want to know who else might be involved in whatever they're doing. I want to know who knew about their relationship and when they knew it." Hank studied me for a long moment. "This isn't just about the divorce anymore, is it?" "No," I admitted. "It's about justice, and maybe a little bit about revenge." I met his gaze steadily. "Does that make me a terrible person?" He sat in the chair Caroline had vacated hours earlier. "Considering what they've done? I'd say it makes you human." He pulled out a small notebook. "Tell me exactly what you want to know." For the next hour, we developed a strategy. Hank would continue surveillance, documenting their activities and interactions. He'd speak with staff at buildings where they spent time, cultivate sources who might provide useful information. Meanwhile, I would cooperate fully with Caroline's legal team while appearing, outwardly at least, to be focused solely on my health. "The element of surprise is important," I explained. "I want them to think I'm too sick, too broken to fight back. When they let their guard down, that's when we'll have the best chance of learning the full extent of their deception." Hank's expression was a mixture of concern and admiration. "Just remember to actually take care of your health, Farrah. The best revenge plan in the world won't matter if you're not here to see it through." The wisdom in his words penetrated my newfound determination. He was right. My first battle had to be against the cancer. Everything else was secondary. "I promise," I said, and meant it. When Stella came to take me to her home the following day, she found me sitting fully dressed in a chair by the window, my hospital bag packed, a calm expression on my face. "You seem different," she observed as she helped me into her car. I gazed out at the hospital where I'd received my cancer diagnosis, where I'd learned of my husband's financial betrayal, where I'd begun to forge a new version of myself from the ashes of the old. "I am different," I replied. "I'm not just fighting cancer anymore, Stella. I'm fighting for my future. All of it." She glanced at me as she pulled into traffic. "Should Adam be worried?" For the first time in weeks, I smiled. A small, determined curve of my lips that held no warmth, but plenty of purpose. Adam should be terrified. He just doesn't know it yet. Stella's guest room became my sanctuary during the weeks that followed. Her modest craftsman home couldn't have been more different from the sleek modern house I'd shared with Adam. Warm wood tones instead of cool marble, cozy furnishings that invited relaxation rather than showcased design trends. There was something healing about the very ordinariness of the space. My modified chemotherapy regimen was still brutal, but marginally more manageable. The anti-nausea medications worked better, and the treatment schedule allowed more recovery time between sessions. Small victories, but I clung to them. 3 weeks after my hospital stay, I stood in front of Stella's bathroom mirror, studying my reflection. The woman who stared back was a stranger, bald, hollow-cheeked, with dark circles beneath eyes that had aged years and months. But there was something else there too, something in the set of my jaw and the clarity of my gaze that hadn't been there before. Determination, maybe, or resignation transformed into resolve. I traced the outline of my bare scalp with trembling fingers. My eyebrows had thinned dramatically, and my eyelashes were nearly gone. Cancer and chemotherapy had stripped away every physical attribute I'd once identified with femininity and attractiveness, and yet I was still here, still fighting. I will survive this, I whispered to my reflection. All of it. The cancer, the betrayal, the loss. It wasn't a question or a hope. It was a declaration, a promise to myself. The doorbell rang, interrupting my moment of resolve. Voices drifted up from downstairs, Stella greeting someone, the deeper tones of a male response. Curious, I wrapped my robe more tightly around my thin frame and made my way carefully down the stairs. Mark Wilson from the architectural firm stood in Stella's living room, looking uncomfortable but determined. My former colleague and Adam's business partner shifted his weight from foot to foot when he saw me. "Farrah," he said, his voice gentle. "Thank you for seeing me. I know this isn't a good time, but—" "It's fine, Mark." I gestured to the sofa. "Please, sit." He perched on the edge of the cushion, his expression troubled. "I've been trying to work up the courage to come see you, to apologize." "For what?" "For not warning you about Adam. For not doing more to stop him." He ran a hand through his graying hair. I knew he was pulling away, making excuses about the Moreland project to cover for time spent with her. He couldn't bring himself to say Gemma's name. "I confronted him once, told him he needed to either recommit to your marriage or be honest with you. He promised he'd figure things out, but then your diagnosis came." I settled into an armchair across from him, suddenly exhausted. "It's not your responsibility to manage my husband's moral failings, Mark." "Maybe not. But as your friend, I should have done more." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. "That's actually why I'm here. This isn't just an apology visit. It's a proposition." I raised what remained of my eyebrows. "A proposition?" "Adam's been pushing to sell his share of the firm, to me." Mark placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. "He's in a hurry, which means he's willing to accept less than full value. I think he needs cash for that Florida property the lawyers found." The mention of the condo made my stomach clench, but I kept my expression neutral. "And this concerns me how?" "I don't want to buy him out," Mark said simply. "I want you to." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "Me?" "His ownership stake represents 10 years of your shared life, Farrah. Years when you supported his career, made sacrifices for the firm, contributed design ideas that helped us win major contracts." Mark tapped the envelope. "I've had our firm's value independently assessed. Adam's share is worth approximately $2.3 million. He's offering to sell to me for $1.7 million because he needs cash quickly and thinks I'm his only option." My mind raced, trying to process what Mark was suggesting. "I don't have that kind of money, especially with the accounts frozen during divorce proceedings. And even if I did, I don't know the first thing about running an architectural firm." "You wouldn't need to run it," Mark explained. "You'd be a silent partner. I'd handle day-to-day operations as I always have. Your investment would be passive, but profitable." He leaned forward. "I've spoken to your attorney, Ms. Winters. There's a way to structure this through the court that would allow you to use a portion of the frozen joint assets to make the purchase. Adam would get his money, but it would be a fair transaction, overseen by the judge, not theft." The idea was tantalizing, taking ownership of something Adam valued, something he'd built his identity around. But the practicalities seemed overwhelming. "I'm in the middle of cancer treatment, Mark. I can barely manage getting dressed some days." "Which is exactly why you need to secure your financial future," he countered. "The firm is profitable and growing. Your share would generate substantial income whether or not you're able to work. And—" He hesitated. "It would drive Adam absolutely crazy to know you're his replacement at the company." That last point resonated more than I cared to admit. The idea of Adam discovering that I, weak, sick, abandoned me, had taken his place at the prestigious firm he'd helped build. There was undeniable satisfaction in imagining his reaction. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Discuss it with Caroline." Mark nodded, rising to leave. "Of course. The offer in that envelope expires in 2 weeks. That's when Adam's expecting my answer." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Farrah, everyone at the firm is disgusted by what he did. If you decide to become our new partner, you'd be welcomed." After he left, I sat holding the envelope, turning it over and over in my hands. Stella watched silently from the doorway. "Are you going to do it?" she asked finally. "I don't know." But even as I said it, something shifted inside me. The seed of an idea began to take root. Not just about the firm, but about how I might reclaim everything Adam had tried to take from me and more. The next morning, I called Caroline Winters. "I need to meet with you and your financial team," I said without preamble when she answered. "Today, if possible." Her slight pause conveyed surprise at my urgency. "I can arrange it for this afternoon. Is everything all right?" "Everything is about to get much better," I replied. 4 hours later, I sat in Caroline's conference room with her forensic accountant, financial advisor, and paralegal. I'd dressed carefully for the meeting, a wig I hadn't worn before, makeup, applied with precision to camouflage my pallor, a tailored suit that hung too loosely on my frame but conveyed the professional image I needed. "Before we discuss Mark Wilson's proposal," I began, "I want to talk about a different financial matter." I placed a small slip of paper on the conference table. "I've been playing the same lottery numbers for nearly 7 years. My mother's birthday, my father's birthday, the day Adam and I met, and our wedding date." Caroline glanced at the paper. A receipt for a lottery ticket purchased the previous day. "Mrs. Sullivan, with all due respect, gambling is rarely a sound financial strategy, especially given your current circumstances." "It's $5 a week," I said calmly, "a habit I maintained even through chemo treatments. Stella buys my ticket when I'm too ill to go out." I met Caroline's gaze directly. "I don't expect to win. That's not why I'm telling you this." "Then why are you?" the financial advisor, Mr. Brennan, asked. "Because I want to establish legally and officially that my lottery purchases predate my separation from Adam by many years. That these are my numbers played consistently with my personal funds." I leaned forward. "And I want to establish that any future winnings would be my separate property, not marital assets subject to division." Understanding dawned in Caroline's eyes. "You're creating a record. Insurance, so to speak." "Exactly. If by some miracle my numbers ever hit, I don't want Adam claiming any portion of the winnings." I allowed myself a small smile. "Consider it a procedural precaution for a practical impossibility." Caroline nodded slowly, then turned to her paralegal. "Prepare an affidavit documenting Mrs. Sullivan's lottery playing history. Include witness statements from the sister and anyone else who can verify the consistency of the numbers played and the source of funds used." She looked back at me with newfound respect. "That's very forward-thinking, Mrs. Sullivan." "I've learned to anticipate Adam's moves," I replied. "He took my health, my marriage, and attempted to take my financial security. I won't allow him to take anything else." As we turned to discussing Mark's offer, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. For the first time since my diagnosis, I was thinking beyond the immediate crisis, beyond cancer, beyond betrayal, to a future I would shape on my own terms. That evening, as Stella drove me home from the meeting, she glanced at me curiously. "Something's different about you today. You seem, I don't know, lighter somehow." I gazed out the window at the passing cityscape, the setting sun painting the buildings in shades of gold and amber. "I made a decision today, Stella. I'm done being a victim of cancer, of Adam, of circumstances. From now on, I'm writing my own story. Starting with buying Adam's share of the firm? That's just the beginning," I said softly. "Just the beginning." When we arrived home, I carefully climbed the stairs to my room, more tired than I wanted to admit. The chemo was taking its toll, my body fighting battles on cellular levels I couldn't see or fully comprehend. But as I settled into bed, I felt stronger than I had in months. On my nightstand sat the lottery ticket I'd asked Stella to purchase, a small rectangle of paper bearing numbers that represented milestones in a life that no longer existed. Next to it lay a legal pad where I'd begun outlining plans for the future, a future that had seemed impossible just weeks earlier. I picked up a pen and added a new item to my growing list. Open separate bank account for lottery winnings. Not because I actually expected to win, but because for the first time since Adam walked out, I was planning for possibilities rather than bracing for disasters. And that perhaps was its own kind of victory. The purchase of Adam's stake in the architectural firm was finalized with remarkable speed. Caroline's legal maneuvering, combined with a judge who took one look at my medical records and Adam's financial activities and ruled decisively in my favor, created a perfect storm. Adam was legally obligated to sell his share to me at the reduced price he'd offered Mark, with the funds coming from our frozen joint assets. I wasn't present for the signing, still too weak from my latest round of chemotherapy to attend. But Mark sent me a text afterward. "It's done." You should have seen his face when he realized who the buyer was. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt a curious detachment, as if watching events unfold from a great distance. Perhaps it was the chemo fog that clouded my thinking on my worst days, or perhaps it was a newly developed emotional armor. Either way, the news settled over me with a calm that would have been impossible weeks earlier. What did register was the financial security the transaction provided. My 50% ownership of a successful architectural firm meant monthly income regardless of my ability to work. It meant health insurance that wasn't tied to Adam or dependent on Cobra extensions. It meant one less thing to worry about as I fought the cancer that had invaded my body. "We should celebrate," Stella suggested that evening, bringing me herbal tea and dry toast, all my sensitive stomach could handle after treatment. "When I can actually digest champagne again," I promised with a wan smile. "Right now, keeping this toast down feels like victory enough." My sister's expression softened with concern. "How are you really doing, Farrah? Not just physically, but with everything else?" I considered the question seriously, taking inventory of my emotional state. "I feel distant from it all. Like Adam and Gemma and their betrayal happened to someone else, someone I used to be." I sipped the tea carefully. "Is that strange?" "No," Stella said after a thoughtful pause. "I think it's your mind protecting you, helping you focus on healing first. The rest will come later, when you're stronger." She was right, though neither of us fully understood then how prescient her words would prove to be. 2 days later, Hank arrived with a heavy portfolio tucked under his arm, his expression difficult to read. "I've been following Adam and Gemma as requested," he began, without preamble once we settled in Stella's sunroom. "Documenting their patterns, their contacts, their activities." I nodded, bracing myself. "And?" He opened the portfolio, revealing meticulously organized surveillance reports, photographs, and financial records. They've been busy, and not just romantically. For the next hour, Hank walked me through evidence suggesting that Adam and Gemma's relationship extended far beyond an affair. What had begun as embezzlement from Gemma's real estate firm had evolved into what appeared to be a sophisticated property scheme. They were using inside information to purchase properties before they hit the market, renovating them minimally, and flipping them to foreign investors at inflated prices. These investors never see the properties in person, Hank explained. They're buying based on Gemma's reputation and doctored photos. By the time they realize they've overpaid for mediocre properties, the money's gone. I stared at the financial diagrams, the property listings, the bank transfers moving through a maze of LLCs and offshore accounts. How long has this been going on? From what I can tell, about 8 months. It started small, a property here and there, but it's accelerated in the past 3 months. He met my eyes directly. Since your diagnosis, something cold settled in my stomach. They're using my illness as cover. The distraction of a cancer-stricken wife makes the perfect smokescreen for financial fraud. Hank didn't contradict me. The Florida condo appears to be their exit strategy. They've been moving funds there gradually, establishing local bank accounts, making connections in the Miami real estate market. They're planning to leave, I said, the realization dawning. Start over somewhere new with their ill-gotten gains. That would be my assessment. Yes. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. This was bigger than a betrayal of marriage vows, bigger than an affair with a friend. This was calculated, criminal exploitation of investors, of Gemma's firm, and indirectly, of me and my cancer. What do you want to do with this information? Hank asked quietly. It was the question I'd been asking myself since discovering the affair. Exposure? Revenge? Justice? The options swirled in my chemo-addled brain, none quite right for the magnitude of what I'd learned. Nothing, I said finally. Not yet. Hank's eyebrows rose. Nothing? I need to think, to plan. I closed the portfolio with unsteady hands. And right now, I need to focus on surviving the next round of treatment. I met his concerned gaze. Will you keep watching them? Keep gathering evidence? Of course. He hesitated. But Farrah, if they're planning to leave the country, they won't, I said, with a certainty I didn't entirely feel. Adam's too arrogant to run. He thinks he's untouchable. After Hank left, I retreated to my room, more drained than I wanted to admit. The weight of what I'd learned pressed down on me, making it difficult to breathe. I needed space, not just physical distance, but emotional and mental room to process everything. The next morning, I made a decision that surprised even me. I need to go away for a while, I told Stella over breakfast. Somewhere quiet, where I can focus entirely on healing. Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Away? Where? Dad's cabin on Lake Windermere. Our father's rustic vacation home was hardly the luxurious retreat most cancer patients might choose. Remote and simple, it offered basic comforts but little else. No nearby shopping, minimal internet connection, and a good 30-minute drive to the nearest hospital. Are you sure that's wise? Stella's concern was evident. You're still in active treatment. I've spoken with Dr. Wilson. She's arranging for my treatments to continue at Memorial Regional. It's only an hour from the cabin. I pushed my barely touched oatmeal away. I need this, Stella. I need to disappear for a while, to find my center again without constantly reacting to Adam's latest moves or fielding well-meaning but exhausting support from friends. My sister studied me for a long moment. You're withdrawing. I'm regrouping, I corrected gently. There's a difference. 2 days later, with Dr. Wilson's reluctant blessing and a trunk full of medical supplies, nutrition shakes, and comfortable clothes, I followed Stella's car up the winding road to Lake Windermere. The early autumn air held a crispness that filled my lungs with something close to pleasure for the first time in months. The cabin was exactly as I remembered from childhood summers: rustic pine walls, sturdy furniture built for comfort rather than style, and windows that framed the lake like living paintings. A hint of wood smoke lingered from previous visitors, mingling with the scent of pine and clean air. "I've stocked the refrigerator and pantry," Stella said, carrying my lightest bag inside. "The freezer has meals prepped for days when you don't feel up to cooking. Dad had the generator service last month, so you shouldn't lose power even if there's a storm." She set my bag down, her expression troubled. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Farrah? Being here alone during treatment." "I won't be completely alone," I reminded her. "Hank will check in every few days and you'll be here weekends. The neighbors are year-round residents, and they have my contact information." I moved to the window, drawing strength from the serene lake view. "I need this, Stella. Space to heal without constantly navigating other people's feelings about my situation." She nodded reluctantly. "Promise you'll call if anything, and I mean anything, feels off. Day or night." "I promise." After a thorough review of my medication schedule, emergency contacts, and treatment transportation plan, Stella finally departed. The sound of her car fading into the distance until only the rustle of leaves and lap of lake water against the shore remained. For the first time in months, I was truly alone. No well-meaning sister hovering nearby, no medical professionals monitoring my vitals, no invisible presence of Adam's betrayal permeating familiar spaces. Just me, the cabin, and the quiet certainty that whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. That evening, wrapped in a quilt on the cabin's screened porch, I watched the sunset paint the lake in shades of amber and rose. My phone sat silent beside me, deliberately set to "Do Not Disturb." The only exceptions were Stella, Hank, Dr. Wilson, and Caroline Winters, the small circle of people I still trusted completely. This strategic withdrawal wasn't about hiding or giving up. It was about creating space for myself away from the chaos Adam had created. Away from the well-meaning but exhausting sympathy of friends. Away from the constant reminders of what I'd lost and what still threatened to take even more from me. Here, among the pine trees and beside the lake where I'd spent childhood summers learning to swim and sail, I would reconnect with the core of who I was before cancer, before Adam, before all of it. Here, I would build myself back, cell by cell if necessary, into someone stronger than the woman who had been so thoroughly betrayed. I pulled out the journal I'd brought, opening to the first blank page. At the top, I wrote a single word: rebirth. Because that's what this was. Not an ending or a retreat, but the beginning of something new. The old Farrah, the one who had built her identity around being Adam's wife and a successful architect, was gone. Cancer and betrayal had seen to that. But from those ashes, someone new would emerge. I didn't yet know who that person would be. I only knew she would be stronger, wiser, and completely her own. As darkness settled over the lake, I made my way inside, tidying up with what little energy I had left. On the rustic dining table, I placed the folder containing all the documentation of Adam and Gemma's activities, my lottery ticket secure in its inner pocket. Then I added my medications, arranged in their weekly organizer, visible reminders of the battles I was fighting on multiple fronts. Tomorrow would bring another chemotherapy session, another day of physical struggle. But here, in this quiet space I'd claimed for myself, I would face each challenge one at a time, without the added burden of maintaining appearances or managing others' expectations. This withdrawal was not surrender. It was strategic redeployment. And when I emerged, when my body had healed and my spirit had rekindled, Adam would discover that the woman he'd discarded was gone. In her place would be someone he never saw coming. Days at the lake cabin fell into a rhythm dictated by my treatments and recovery cycles. Mondays meant chemotherapy at Memorial Regional, followed by 2 days of intense fatigue and nausea. By Thursday, I'd usually regained enough strength to take short walks along the lakeshore. Weekends brought Stella's visits, carrying news from the outside world I'd temporarily abandoned. During those first few weeks of self-imposed exile, I slept more than I had since childhood. Deep, healing sleep uninterrupted by the constant low-grade anxiety that had plagued me in the city. When not sleeping, I spent hours on the porch watching the lake's changing moods, from morning mist rising off the water to afternoon sunlight dancing across its surface to evening stillness under starry skies. "You look better," Dr. Wilson commented, during my 4th treatment at Memorial Regional. "Your blood counts are improving too." I nodded, too tired for extensive conversation but aware of the truth in her words. The strategic withdrawal was working, not miraculously, not instantaneously, but steadily. My body was responding to the combination of medical intervention and mental peace. After 6 weeks at the cabin, something unexpected happened. I woke, one morning with an urge to create, a sensation so familiar yet so long absent that it felt like greeting an old friend. Taking my coffee to the rustic desk overlooking the lake, I pulled out sketch paper and pencils I'd packed more out of habit than intention. My hand moved across the paper hesitantly at first, then with increasing confidence. Not architectural drawings as I'd expected, but fluid lines capturing the cabin's relationship to the landscape, the way morning light filtered through pine branches, the perfect reflection of mountains in still water. I lost myself in the process, emerging hours later with a stack of sketches and a strange sense of accomplishment. They weren't professional quality. Chemo had affected my fine motor control, but they represented something more important than technical perfection. They were evidence of my creative spirit, awakening from dormancy. The next day, I asked Hank to bring art supplies during his weekly check-in visit. He arrived with an embarrassment of riches: watercolors, pastels, charcoals, and a beautiful leather-bound sketchbook. "I wasn't sure what you needed," he explained, setting the packages on the dining table. "So I bought a little of everything." For the first time in months, I laughed, a genuine sound that surprised us both. "This is perfect, Hank. Thank you." As he updated me on his surveillance of Adam and Gemma, their property scheme expanding, their plans for relocation accelerating, I found myself strangely detached. Their actions still mattered for practical reasons: evidence gathering, legal proceedings, financial protections, but they no longer held emotional power over me. "You seem different," Hank observed as he prepared to leave. "More present." I considered his words, recognizing their accuracy. I'm finding myself again. Pieces I thought were lost for good. After he left, I opened the watercolors, experimenting with capturing the afternoon light on the lake. The results were amateur at best, but the act itself felt profoundly healing, creating beauty after so much ugliness, building something new after so much destruction. Art became my daily practice, as essential to my recovery as medications and nutrition shakes. I worked primarily in watercolors, drawn to their unpredictability and flow, the way they required both control and surrender, much like the healing process itself. During my better weeks, I began venturing into the small town near the lake. The local bookstore became a favorite haunt, its creaky wooden floors and ceiling-high shelves offering literary escape on days when my body kept me close to home. The owner, a silver-haired woman named Eleanor, never commented on my obvious illness, treating me instead with the matter-of-fact kindness I found myself craving. "I've set aside some art instruction books," she told me one afternoon, placing a stack on the counter. "Noticed your interest in watercolors last time you were browsing." The simple act of being seen as a person with interests rather than a cancer patient felt like a gift. I purchased the entire stack along with a locally made journal bound in soft leather. That journal became another essential resource. a private space to process thoughts too raw for verbal expression. I wrote about the cancer, about Adam's betrayal, about my fears and hopes in small daily victories. Some entries were angry, others despairing, many simply exhausted. But gradually, imperceptibly, the tone shifted. Less about what had been taken from me, more about what I was discovering within myself. 3 months into my lake retreat, I received unexpected news from Dr. Wilson. The latest scans show significant reduction in tumor activity, she said, her professional demeanor softening with genuine pleasure. Your body is responding exceptionally well to treatment. I sat in the sterile exam room, trying to absorb the meaning behind her clinical language. So the cancer is not gone, she cautioned, but retreating. If this response continues, we can discuss scaling back to maintenance therapy after your next 3 sessions. She studied my face. This is good news, Farrah. Very good news. That evening, back at the cabin, I celebrated alone with a cup of herbal tea on the porch, watching an osprey dive for fish in the golden late afternoon light. The cancer was retreating. My body, so recently a battleground of betrayal on cellular and emotional levels, was fighting back successfully on at least one front. I updated my journal with the news, then found myself adding a list. Things I've gained. The list surprised me with its length and substance. Financial independence through firm ownership. Artistic rediscovery. Deeper connection with Stella. New relationships with Eleanor and others in the lake community. Physical strength returning incrementally. Mental clarity. Emotional resilience. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider life after cancer, after divorce, after betrayal. Not returning to what was, but creating something entirely new. The sketches and watercolors scattered around the cabin represented more than creative expression. They were explorations of possible futures. The following week brought Caroline Winters to the cabin, legal documents in her elegant briefcase and determination in her sharp eyes. We've compiled enough evidence about Adam and Gemma's property scheme to file fraud charges, she explained, spreading papers across the dining table. The choice is yours. Pursue criminal prosecution now, or hold the evidence as leverage in divorce proceedings. I studied the documents, bank statements, property records, witness testimony from former clients who'd realized they'd been defrauded. The case against Adam and Gemma was substantial, potentially devastating. What would you recommend? I asked, genuinely curious about her professional assessment. Caroline considered the question carefully. Legally, pursuing criminal charges immediately would likely result in the most severe consequences for them both. However, she paused, choosing her words with precision. Timing is a strategic consideration. Once this evidence becomes public, they'll be forced to respond. The element of surprise is valuable currency in situations like this. I nodded, understanding the subtext of her advice. Let's hold for now. Continue building the case quietly, while I finish my primary treatment course. As she gathered the documents, Caroline's gaze swept over the watercolors displayed around the cabin. You're an artist? I'm becoming one, I replied, the distinction feeling important somehow. Rediscovering parts of myself that got lost along the way. After she left, I added to my growing resources, legal ammunition now securely compiled, medical progress documented, artistic skills developing, and most importantly, a sense of self, independent from the roles I'd previously occupied. I was no longer simply Adam's betrayed wife or a cancer patient fighting for survival. I was Farrah, emerging from the chrysalis of trauma transformed, not yet fully formed, but taking shape with each passing day. That night, I stood on the dock watching moonlight create a silver path across the dark water. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here, feeling the cool night air on skin no longer quite so paper-thin, thinking about futures instead of endings. I touched the scar where surgeons had removed cancer from my breast, a permanent reminder of vulnerability. Then I looked up at the vast starry sky, a reminder of equally permanent strength. Both were true. Both were part of me now, and both would inform whatever came next. 6 months into my lake retreat, the first signs of spring began to emerge. Tender green buds on tree branches, birdsong returning to the mornings, and occasional warm breezes, interrupting the lingering winter chill. My body seemed to mirror nature's renewal. The severe fatigue that had defined my existence began to ease, replaced by longer periods of energy and clearer thinking. "Your blood work is the best we've seen since starting treatment," Dr. Wilson confirmed during my latest appointment. "The maintenance therapy is working well, and your body is recovering more effectively between treatments." I'd completed the most intensive phase of chemotherapy and transitioned to a maintenance protocol that required visits every 3 weeks instead of weekly. My hair had begun to return, soft as a newborn's and surprisingly darker than before, nearly black where it had once been chestnut brown. The face in my mirror was still gaunt, but color had returned to my cheeks, and my eyes had regained some of their former brightness. "When do you think I can return to work?" I asked, the question surprising us both. Dr. Wilson considered carefully. "Part-time might be reasonable within the next month, assuming your progress continues, but I'd recommend easing back gradually." The prospect of rejoining the world I'd withdrawn from stirred complicated emotions. The lake cabin had become a sanctuary, a place of healing and rediscovery. Yet I recognized the signs of readiness within myself: curiosity about the architectural firm I now co-owned, interest in professional challenges beyond watercolor landscapes, and a growing desire to reclaim spaces I'd ceded during my illness. After my appointment, I made an unscheduled stop at the firm's offices, my first visit since becoming Mark's partner. The receptionist's eyes widened in surprise. "Mrs. Sullivan, we weren't expecting you." Her gaze flickered over my changed appearance, professional politeness barely masking shock at my transformation. "It's an impromptu visit," I explained. "Is Mark available?" She made a quick call, and moments later, Mark appeared in the reception, a genuine pleasure lighting his face. "Farrah, this is a wonderful surprise." As he led me through the office, I noted the subtle changes. New design boards in the conference room, different artwork in the corridors, several unfamiliar faces among the staff. The space felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, like revisiting your childhood home after decades away. Mark's office remained largely unchanged. Organized chaos of blueprints and material samples, awards lining the walls, the perpetually empty coffee mug he used as a paperweight. He cleared a chair for me, watching with barely concealed curiosity as I settled into it. "You look well," he said finally. "The lake has been good for you." "It has." I glanced around, taking in the visible signs of ongoing projects. "How are things here?" "My monthly reports show impressive numbers, but they don't tell the whole story." For the next hour, Mark updated me on client developments, staff changes, and upcoming projects. I listened attentively, asking occasional questions, but mostly absorbing the rhythms of the business world I'd temporarily abandoned. "Sorryland. Project is back in discussion," Mark mentioned toward the end of our conversation. "They've been waiting for you, actually. Said they'd prefer to work with the original vision architect when you're ready." The project that had once seemed so crucial, the one Adam had prioritized over my cancer diagnosis, now felt like a relic from another lifetime. Yet a flicker of professional interest sparked within me. "I'd like to review the materials," said. Not making any promises, but I could at least look at where things stand. Mark's smile was warm with understanding. "No pressure. The door is open whenever you're ready to walk through it." As I prepared to leave, he handed me a thick envelope. "Financial details for next quarter's projections. I was going to mail these to the lake, but since you're here..." He hesitated. "Adam came by last week. tried to schedule a meeting with me. My pulse quickened slightly, the first physical reaction I'd had to Adam's name in months. What did he want? To discuss revisiting the terms of the ownership transfer, according to his message. Mark's expression hardened. I didn't take the meeting, referred him to the legal department. I nodded, processing this information. Has he tried again? No. But Farrah... Mark's voice lowered. He didn't look good. Thin, disheveled, nothing like his usual polished self. I absorbed this without comment, tucking the envelope into my bag. Thank you for handling it appropriately. Outside, spring sunshine warmed my face as I walked to my car. Adam's attempt to revisit the firm ownership was interesting. Perhaps the property scheme wasn't generating the expected returns, or perhaps legal consequences were beginning to materialize. Either way, his actions confirmed what Hank's surveillance had suggested: financial pressure mounting from multiple directions. Rather than returning directly to the lake, I made another unannounced visit, this one to my former home, the Modernist. House Adam and I had designed together in the early years of our marriage. I parked across the street, observing the property from a distance. The differences were immediately apparent. The meticulously maintained front gardens had grown slightly wild. The signature architectural lighting we'd installed remained unlit despite the approaching evening. A luxury SUV I didn't recognize sat in the driveway, Gemma's presumably. As I watched, the front door opened, and she emerged carrying a designer overnight bag, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Even from a distance, I could see tension in her movements, a harried quality that contradicted her usual calculated grace. She tossed the bag into the SUV and returned inside without the lingering, appreciative glance at the home's design features that had once been her habit. I remained parked for another hour, conducting my own surveillance. Adam appeared briefly, at an upstairs window, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing with agitation visible even from my vantage point. Later, delivery food arrived, a marked departure from the home-cooked meals he'd once insisted upon. Small details, but revealing ones. The next day, I met Hank at a cafe halfway between the city and the lake, eager to compare my observations with his professional findings. Their property scheme is unraveling, he confirmed, sliding photos across the table. 3 investors have filed complaints with regulatory authorities. Gemma's real estate firm has opened an internal investigation into accounting irregularities. Photos showed Adam and Gemma in various states of distress, arguing outside a restaurant, looking tense at a property showing, Adam pacing outside a lawyer's office while Gemma waited in the car. The Florida property has been listed for sale, Hank continued. Priced well below market value, suggesting urgency. I sipped my tea, considering the implications. They need cash. Desperately, from all appearances. Adam's been trying to access investment accounts that were frozen in the divorce proceedings. Gemma's credit cards have been declined at several establishments. Hank's expression remained professional, but satisfaction tinged his voice. The house, your house, has a pre-foreclosure notice filed against it. Mortgage payments 3 months behind. The news should have brought vindication or at least satisfaction. Instead, I felt a curious detachment, as if hearing about strangers' misfortunes. The emotional tether that had once bound me to Adam's fate had been severed, not in anger, but in healing. Have they made any attempts to access my current location or information? I asked, the practical question more relevant than their financial troubles. Adam hired a private investigator briefly, but the man wasn't particularly skilled. Hank allowed himself a small smile. I made sure he followed misleading trails. As far as they know, you're receiving treatment at a specialized facility in Arizona. I nodded, grateful for the continued privacy of my lake retreat. And the evidence regarding their property fraud? Growing stronger. Caroline's team has documentation of at least 12 fraudulent transactions, wire transfers to offshore accounts, and testimony from 2 former business associates willing to cooperate with authorities. As spring advanced, I continued my reconnaissance, making periodic quiet visits to the city to observe from a distance the unraveling of Adam and Gemma's carefully constructed world. I never approached them directly, never made my presence known. There was no confrontation, no dramatic scene, just methodical gathering of information about their deteriorating circumstances. Each visit reinforced what the evidence had already shown: their relationship fracturing under financial pressure, their professional reputations in tatters, their carefully constructed facade crumbling to reveal the empty core beneath. I took no pleasure in their downfall, but I did take notes, detailed observations about vulnerabilities, pressure points, and potential legal exposure, not for revenge, but for protection. Understanding the enemy's position is the first rule of strategic defense. During one such reconnaissance trip, I stopped at a convenience store near my former home, pulling in for gas before the drive back, to the lake. As I waited for the tank to fill, I remembered my weekly ritual, the lottery ticket I'd faithfully purchased for years. "One quick pick for tonight's drawing," I said to the cashier, handing over $5. He printed the ticket, passing it to me with a practiced smile. "Good luck." I glanced at the random numbers, so different from my usual carefully selected combination, and tucked the ticket into my wallet without a second thought. The significance of this small deviation from routine wouldn't become apparent until much later. Back at the lake the following morning, I added my latest observations to the growing file of information about Adam and Gemma. Their world was collapsing naturally, without any direct action from me. Justice, it seemed, didn't always require intervention. Sometimes it arrived of its own accord, drawn by the gravitational pull of consequences following actions. As I closed the file, my phone buzzed with a text from Stella. "Channel 7 News. Now." I turned on the cabin's small television, something I rarely used, and found the local news in progress. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen sent a jolt through me. "Local real estate agent arrested in property fraud scheme." The camera showed Gemma being led from her office in handcuffs, her expression a mixture of shock and fear. The reporter's voice provided context. Gemma Carlton of Prestige Properties was taken into custody this morning on multiple charges of fraud, embezzlement, and wire fraud. Sources close to the investigation suggest more arrests are imminent as authorities continue to unravel what appears to be an extensive property scheme targeting foreign investors. I watched in silence as the story unfolded, detailing allegations that matched exactly what Hank and Caroline had uncovered. The reconnaissance phase was ending more abruptly than I'd anticipated, events now moving with a momentum of their own. My phone rang almost immediately. Caroline Winters, her voice tight with urgency. "I assume you're watching the news," she said without preamble. "Adam hasn't been arrested yet, but it's coming. The DA's office has been in touch with my team about the evidence we've compiled." "What do they need from me?" I asked, already mentally preparing for the next phase. "A formal statement eventually. For now, just be aware that things are accelerating." She paused. "Are you ready for this to become public, Farrah? Once Adam is arrested, your connection to the case will likely emerge." I looked out at the peaceful lake, reflecting the clear spring sky. The months of quiet healing, of strategic withdrawal and resource building had prepared me for precisely this moment. "Yes," I said with calm certainty. "I'm ready." Adam's arrest came 3 days after Gemma's, a textbook dawn raid captured by local news cameras that seemed suspiciously well-positioned for the 6 a.m. event. I watched the footage from my lake cabin, a strange sense of unreality washing over me as my estranged husband, disheveled and unshaven, wearing what appeared to be a hastily donned dress shirt with sweatpants, was led from our former home, in handcuffs. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and tax evasion. The district attorney's press conference that afternoon mentioned millions in fraudulent property transactions and extensive scheme targeting foreign investors. Adam's bail was set at $2 million, an amount that, according to Hank's sources, he was struggling to raise. "He's been calling everyone," Stella reported during her weekend visit. "Former colleagues, clients, even friends from college. No one's willing to help." I nodded, absorbing this information with the same detached interest I might give a case study on professional ethics. "What about his parents?" "Apparently they're disappointed and want him to take responsibility for his actions." Stella's air quotes conveyed her skepticism. Translation: they won't risk their retirement funds on a son facing federal charges. The weekend papers featured the case prominently, with one investigative piece tracing the scheme back to its origins, shortly after Adam and Gemma began their affair. What struck me most was how thoroughly they had convinced themselves of their own invulnerability, how recklessly they had expanded their fraud even as the risks multiplied. Pride before the fall, as the saying goes. Caroline called on Monday morning, her tone businesslike. "The prosecutor wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're building their case and believe your testimony could be valuable, particularly regarding the timeline and financial aspects." I agreed to the meeting, though anxiety flickered at the edges of my calm. Public testimony would mean public exposure. My cancer, my abandonment, my private pain laid bare in court documents and witness statements. "Will I need to appear in court?" I asked. "Eventually, yes, though the case may not go to trial if they accept plea deals." Caroline paused. "Are you prepared for that possibility, Farrah?" "It would be completely understandable if you preferred to limit your involvement." I considered the question seriously. The lake retreat had helped me heal physically and emotionally, but public scrutiny was another matter entirely. Yet something within me, the same spark of determination that had carried me through cancer treatments and betrayal, rejected the idea of hiding from this final confrontation. "I'll do whatever is necessary," I said finally. "They chose this path, not me." The next day, I met with Assistant District Attorney James Harrington, a serious man with prematurely silver hair and intense focus. For 2 hours, I walked him through my knowledge of Adam and Gemma's activities, providing dates, financial details, and context that helped connect distinct pieces of their scheme. "Your recall is impressive, Mrs. Sullivan," Harrington remarked, reviewing his notes, "especially given the health challenges you were facing during this period." "Cancer focuses the mind," I replied simply. "When your body is betraying you cell by cell, you become acutely aware of other betrayals." He nodded, silent appreciation in his eyes. "There's something else you should know. We've offered Ms. Carlton a deal in exchange for testimony against your husband. Her attorney has indicated she's likely to accept." The news shouldn't have surprised me. Gemma's self-preservation instinct had always been strong, yet I felt a curious twist of emotion. Not jealousy or anger, but something closer to pity. Whatever genuine feeling might have existed between them hadn't survived the first real test. "Will her testimony affect the divorce proceedings?" I asked, practicality reasserting itself. "It could potentially expedite things. Her statement includes admissions about their relationship timeline that directly contradict your husband's claims in family court." Harrington closed his notebook. "Your attorney can petition for immediate resolution based on this new evidence." As I drove back to the lake that evening, thunderclouds gathered on the horizon, matching my contemplative mood. The criminal case against Adam and Gemma was proceeding independently of my actions now, a boulder rolling downhill with its own momentum. My focus needed to shift to the final resolution of my marriage and the formal beginning of whatever came next. Back at the cabin, I called a strategy meeting for the following week. Caroline for legal matters, Mark for business concerns, Stella for personal support, and Hank for security considerations. The time for passive observation had ended. Now decisions must be made and actions taken. They gathered at the cabin on a perfect spring morning, the lake a mirror reflecting blue sky and white clouds. We sat on the screened porch, iced tea and Caroline's meticulous agenda before us. "Let's start with the divorce," Caroline began. "Given recent developments, we have leverage to push for immediate resolution on highly favorable terms. Adam's legal team is overwhelmed with the criminal case and likely to accept reasonable demands without prolonged negotiation." "What exactly are we asking for?" I questioned, leaning forward. "Full ownership of the house, all remaining joint investment, accounts, and a clean break with no alimony in either direction." Caroline's expression was confident. "We'll position it as an opportunity for him to resolve at least one legal matter quickly while focusing on his criminal defense." I considered this, the practicality appealing, but something still unsettled. "The house. I'm not sure I want it anymore. Too many memories." "Take it anyway," Stella advised. "You can always sell it later. It's about what you deserve, not what you plan to keep." Mark cleared his throat. "From a business perspective, your position at the firm is secure regardless of the divorce outcome. The ownership transfer is legally binding and separate from marriage dissolution. However," he hesitated, "there will inevitably be questions from clients and industry colleagues about your connection to the case. We need a communication strategy," I acknowledged. "Something that establishes appropriate distance without appearing vindictive or capitalizing on their downfall." Caroline nodded approvingly. "Precisely. I suggest a simple statement acknowledging the situation, expressing appropriate regret, and focusing on your continued professional commitment moving forward." "What about personal security?" Hank interjected. "Once your involvement in the prosecutor's case becomes public, Adam may react unpredictably. He's facing potential prison time and significant financial penalties. People become desperate in those circumstances." The concern wasn't one I'd fully considered, accustomed as I'd become to the safety of my isolated retreat. "What do you recommend?" "Basic precautions. Security system at whatever residence you choose. Post-divorce. Changed. Routines. Awareness of surroundings." His expression remained professional, but genuine concern showed in his eyes. "And perhaps extending my services for the immediate future." I agreed to all recommendations, recognizing the wisdom in continued vigilance. The meeting continued with discussion of practical matters, my gradual return to work, the sale or retention of various assets, and the management of medical treatments as I transitioned back to city life. As evening approached and my impromptu advisory council prepared to depart, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced since before my diagnosis. The path forward wasn't easy, but it was visible now, a route mapped through legal, professional, and personal territories toward a future I was increasingly eager to reach. Stella lingered after the others left, helping me clear away glasses and notepads. "You've changed," she observed, not for the first time. "There's a certainty about you now." I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. Cancer and betrayal strip away pretense. What remains is either broken beyond repair or forged into something stronger. I looked out at the lake, its surface now rippled by evening breeze. "I'm choosing to be stronger." Later that night, as I reviewed my notes from the meeting, I added a final item to my strategy. Lottery tickets. The weekly ritual that had once been mere habit now represented something symbolic. Continuity through chaos, hope sustained through hardship. I would continue playing my numbers, not with any expectation of winning, but as a personal affirmation that some parts of my pre-cancer, pre-betrayal self remained intact, carried forward into whatever new life awaited. What I couldn't have known then was how significant that small, seemingly inconsequential decision would prove to be, the final piece falling into place for a resolution none of us could have anticipated. Adam's attorney reached out 3 days after our strategy meeting, his tone suggesting urgency that belied his carefully worded email requesting an amicable discussion regarding marital asset distribution. Caroline forwarded the message to me with a single comment. "They're desperate." The timing aligned perfectly with our strategy. Adam needed to resolve the divorce quickly, both to free up potential assets for his criminal defense and to simplify his legal battles. His leverage had evaporated with his arrest. Mine had multiplied. "How do you want to respond?" Caroline asked during our conference call. "Accept the meeting, but on our terms," I replied. "Your office, not his, and I want to be present." Caroline's momentary silence conveyed surprise. "Are you certain? These negotiations can be contentious under the best circumstances. Given your history?" "I'm certain," I interrupted gently. "I need to see him face to face. Not for closure or confrontation, but to fully understand where we stand." The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday, giving me time for another significant step, my official return to the architectural firm. After discussing the transition with Mark, we agreed on a 3-day work week initially, with flexibility, for my continuing medical treatments. My first day back brought a mixture of awkward welcomes and genuine warmth from colleagues. News of Adam's arrest and the fraud scheme had filtered through professional circles, creating an uncomfortable awareness that hung in the air despite everyone's best efforts at normalcy. "We've prepared a statement for clients who inquire about the situation," Mark explained, showing me the carefully worded paragraph that acknowledged my marriage to Adam while emphasizing my separate professional identity and non-involvement in his activities. "It's perfect," I said, relieved to have the issue addressed directly, rather than becoming the elephant in every client meeting. The Moreland project, once the source of Adam's inexcusable prioritization of work over my cancer diagnosis, now landed back on my desk with a poetic symmetry that wasn't lost on me. The clients had maintained their vision, but adjusted their timeline, allowing me to review the original designs with fresh perspective. Immersing myself in the creative challenges of architectural design proved unexpectedly therapeutic. The familiar rhythm of problem-solving and spatial visualization engaged parts of my brain that had lain dormant during treatment, awakening professional instincts that cancer and betrayal had temporarily overshadowed. By the time Thursday arrived, I felt centered in a way I hadn't expected, not just emotionally prepared for the confrontation with Adam, but professionally and personally grounded in my reclaimed identity. Caroline's office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, the conference room offering sweeping views of the city skyline. I arrived early, dressed in a tailored pantsuit that hung slightly loose on my still-recovering frame, but conveyed the professional confidence I needed. "Remember, you don't need to say much," Caroline advised as we waited. "Your presence alone makes a statement. I'll handle the negotiation." Adam arrived with his attorney precisely on time, his appearance shocking despite my mental preparation. The polished, confident man who had once been my husband had been replaced by someone gaunt and gray, his designer suits exchanged for off-the-rack, attire that somehow emphasized rather than disguised his diminished circumstances. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me, perhaps surprised by my presence, perhaps taken aback by my transformation. The soft fuzz of new hair, the weight loss, the subtle markers of illness remained evident, but so too did the strength and clarity I'd cultivated during my retreat. "Farrah," he said, my name half greeting, half question. "Adam," I replied evenly, offering nothing more. His attorney, a harried-looking man with a worn briefcase, took charge, outlining their proposal for asset division, while Adam sat silently, gaze alternating between the conference table and the window behind me. The terms they offered were better than I'd expected, but still short of what Caroline and I had determined was fair. As his attorney spoke, I observed Adam carefully, noting the nervous tap of his fingers, the tightness around his mouth, the shadows beneath his eyes. He was a man under siege, fighting battles on multiple fronts with dwindling resources. When his attorney finished, Caroline outlined our counterproposal methodically, full ownership of the house, complete access to all investment accounts not directly implicated in the fraud investigation, and my existing ownership of Adam's former share in the architectural firm to remain undisturbed. These terms are unworkable, Adam's attorney objected. My client requires liquidity for his ongoing legal expenses. The investment accounts were largely built through my client's prudent financial planning during years when Mr. Sullivan prioritized lifestyle spending, Caroline interrupted smoothly. Furthermore, your client's current legal difficulties stem directly from activities he pursued while abandoning his wife during her cancer treatment. The court will take a dim view of any attempt to use marital assets to defend himself against charges related to his affair and subsequent criminal activities. Adam flinched visibly at the blunt assessment. For the first time, he looked directly at me, something like shame flickering across his features before hardening into resignation. I've prepared documentation showing exactly how much of those assets came from my client's income and careful investment, Caroline continued, sliding a folder across the table. I'm confident a judge would award her considerably more than we're requesting. This offer is generous under the circumstances. The attorney leafed through the documents, his expression growing increasingly troubled. After a whispered consultation with Adam, he straightened. We'll need to review these figures and consult with our financial advisors. Of course, Caroline agreed. However, this offer expires in 48 hours. After that, we proceed to court and request full financial disclosure, including any accounts or assets Mr. Sullivan may have established during his relationship with Ms. Carlton. Adam paled slightly, suggesting there might indeed be hidden resources, not yet discovered by authorities. Interesting. As the meeting concluded, Adam lingered while his attorney gathered papers. Could I have a moment? He asked, looking at me rather than Caroline. I glanced at my lawyer, who raised an eyebrow in silent question. 5 minutes, I decided. Caroline can stay. Adam waited until his attorney had stepped outside before speaking. You look better than I expected. Cancer treatment has advanced considerably, I replied neutrally. And I had excellent medical care. He nodded, eyes dropping to his hands. I want you to know that I regret how everything happened. The timing especially. It wasn't planned. That way. The non-apology hung in the air between us, remarkable for what it didn't acknowledge. That he had abandoned me at my most vulnerable, that he had betrayed me with my friend, that he had systematically drained our accounts while I fought for my life. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss about the settlement? I asked, steering the conversation back to practicalities. He seemed to deflate further. No, just the house. I was hoping we might consider selling it and dividing the proceeds. There are too many memories there now. For you, perhaps, I said, a hint of steel entering my voice. For me, it represents 10 years of investment, financial and emotional. I'll decide its fate, not you. He accepted this with a nod, already standing to leave. At the door, he paused, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're recovering. You deserve that much at least. After he left, Caroline turned to me, professional mask momentarily dropped to reveal genuine curiosity. How do you feel? I considered the question carefully, examining the emotional response to this first direct encounter with Adam since his departure. What I discovered surprised me. Not anger or vindication or even satisfaction, but something closer to pity mixed with a calm detachment that would have been impossible months earlier. I feel complete, I said finally. Like I've closed a circuit that was left open. He's just a man who made terrible choices, not the center of my universe anymore. She smiled, understanding in her eyes. That's the best outcome we could hope for. That evening, as I settled into the small apartment I'd rented upon returning to the city, I reviewed the day's events with the methodical attention I now brought to every aspect of my rebuilding life. The confrontation with Adam had been illuminating, not because of anything he'd said, but because of my own response to him. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Where once his approval and attention had seemed essential, now he appeared diminished. Not just by circumstances, but by comparison to the person I had become through adversity. My phone chimed with a text from Stella. "How did it go? Need me? To come over with wine or ice cream or both?" I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. "It went perfectly," I replied, "and no need for emotional support treats. Just stopping for groceries and my weekly lottery ticket, then having a quiet night in." "You and those lottery tickets," came her teasing response. "When you win millions, remember who brought you soup during chemo. You'll get the first yacht," I promised lightly. At the convenience store near my apartment, I purchased my usual ticket, selecting the familiar numbers that had accompanied me through marriage, cancer, and rebirth. The clerk, a teenager with bright purple hair, handed me the ticket with a practiced, "Good luck." I tucked it into my wallet without a second glance, unaware that those 6 numbers were about to transform my carefully reconstructed life in ways no strategy meeting could have anticipated. The first sign that something extraordinary had happened came at 6:30 a.m. when my phone began vibrating incessantly on the nightstand. Half awake, I fumbled for it, squinting at the screen to find 17 missed calls, most from Stella, but also from Caroline, Mark, and several numbers I didn't recognize. Before I could return any calls, a text from Stella flashed across the screen. "Call me right now. Have you checked your ticket?" Ticket? My mind, still foggy with sleep, took a moment to make the connection. The lottery ticket. Last night. Pulse suddenly racing, I opened my browser and searched for the previous night's lottery results. The 6 winning numbers appeared on the screen, and for a long moment, I simply stared at them, unable to process what I was seeing. They were my numbers. The ones I'd played faithfully for years. The ones representing significant dates from a marriage that no longer existed. I scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over the throw rug in my haste to reach my purse. The ticket was there in my wallet, the numbers matching perfectly with those on my phone screen, $47,800,000. The largest jackpot in 3 years. My legs gave way, and I sank to the floor, ticket clutched in suddenly trembling hands. This couldn't be real. People like me, people who'd endured cancer and betrayal and financial manipulation, didn't suddenly win multi-million-dollar lotteries. It was too perfect, too precisely timed, too much like divine intervention in a life that had seen precious, little evidence of benevolent higher powers. My phone rang again, Stella, for the 18th time that morning. I answered automatically, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you see?" she demanded without preamble. "Tell me you've checked your ticket." "I checked," I managed. It's my numbers." "I know!" she shrieked, loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "It's all over the news. Single winning ticket sold at Mayfield convenience store." "That's your store, Farrah. Your store." The reality began to penetrate my shock. I had won nearly $48 million. After taxes, somewhere around 28-30 million. "I need to call the lottery commission," I said, practicality asserting itself despite my dazed state. "Figure out how to claim it properly." "And you need a security plan immediately," Stella insisted. "Lottery winners become targets, Farrah, especially newly wealthy divorcees with perfect cheekbones." Despite the surreal situation, I laughed. I think cancer took care of my perfect cheekbones, but point taken. I ended the call with a promise to meet Stella for lunch, then sat on my apartment floor, letting the magnitude of this development sink in. Beyond the obvious financial implications, my mind raced with the potential impact on the divorce proceedings, the criminal case against Adam, and my carefully constructed plans for rebuilding my life. Everything would change. Again. Just when I'd begun to find stability. Caroline called as I was making coffee. her lawyer's measured tone barely containing excitement. "I assume you've seen the news?" "I have the winning ticket," I confirmed, still half expecting to wake from this improbable dream. "First, congratulations. Second, we need to meet immediately." Her professional instincts were already engaged. "Your divorce is not yet finalized. While the lottery ticket is your separate property according to the affidavit we filed, we need to ensure complete protection." We arranged to meet at her office at 9 a.m., giving me time to shower and attempt to compose myself. As I dressed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The same face I'd seen yesterday, now regarding me with stunned disbelief. Cancer survivor, betrayed wife, multimillionaire. The juxtaposition seemed absurd. Outside my apartment building, I immediately noticed the news van parked across the street. Somehow, they'd already connected the convenience store location to its regular customers. I ducked back inside, calling for a rideshare from the back entrance instead. Caroline's office was prepared when I arrived, the conference room already, hosting a financial advisor, security consultant, and public relations specialist she'd assembled on short notice. "Lottery wins of this magnitude require immediate strategic planning," she explained as I settled into a chair, still feeling disconnected from reality. "Particularly given your ongoing divorce and Adam's legal troubles." For the next 2 hours, we outlined an approach that incorporated the lottery win into my existing strategy. The financial advisor recommended claiming the win through a trust to provide privacy protection. The security consultant suggested temporary relocation until media interest subsided. The PR specialist drafted a brief statement acknowledging the win while declining further interviews. "What about Adam?" I asked finally, the question that had lingered since I'd verified the numbers. "How will this affect the divorce?" Caroline's expression was carefully neutral. "Legally, the lottery win is your separate property, documented. Through the affidavit, we filed establishing your history of playing these numbers with personal funds. Adam has no claim to these winnings." "But?" I prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation in her tone. "But he may try to delay finalizing the divorce, hoping to leverage your sudden wealth for a more favorable settlement." She straightened a paper, clip with precise movements. "He's desperate for funds for his legal defense. This news will only intensify that desperation." As if summoned by our discussion, Caroline's assistant knocked and entered with a message. "Mr. Sullivan's attorney just called. He'd like to revisit the settlement terms in light of, quote, changed financial circumstances." The speed of Adam's response was both predictable and disappointing. Not even 24 hours had passed since the drawing, yet he was already maneuvering to capitalize on my good fortune. "Declined," Caroline replied immediately. "Our settlement offer stands as presented yesterday, with the 48-hour deadline unchanged." After the meeting disbanded, I sat alone with Caroline, the morning's whirlwind of activities settling into a strange calm. "How are you really feeling about this?" she asked, setting aside legal pads and documents to focus fully on me. I considered the question seriously. "Overwhelmed, confused, like the universe has a very strange sense of humor." I met her gaze directly. "And determined not to let this windfall derail the progress I've made. Money changes circumstances, not character." She nodded approvingly. "That perspective will serve you well. Many lottery winners find sudden wealth more curse than blessing because they're unprepared for the psychological impact. After cancer and betrayal, I think I can handle unexpected fortune," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. By early afternoon, news of my identity as the lottery winner had leaked to local media. My phone exploded with messages, childhood acquaintances, distant relatives, former colleagues, all suddenly remembering our deep connection. I silenced notifications, following the security consultant's advice to minimize digital exposure. Stella met me at a private dining room in an upscale restaurant, having navigated past reporters to reach me. Her excitement provided welcome normalcy amid the surreal day, I still can't believe it, she said, embracing me tightly. My sister, the multimillionaire. It's cosmically perfect after everything Adam put you through. Speaking of Adam, I began, but was interrupted by my phone, one of the few numbers I'd kept unblocked. Hank with news too urgent to wait. Adam's outside your apartment building, he reported tersely, pacing the sidewalk, looking agitated. I've stationed someone to monitor but wanted you to know immediately. The image was unsettling. Adam, presumably having seen the news of my win, driven to physically seek me out rather than working through legal channels. What did he hope to accomplish by such a direct approach? Thank you, I told Hank. I won't be returning there tonight. Make arrangements for a hotel, please. After ending the call, I explained the situation to Stella, whose expression darkened, with concern. He's getting desperate, she observed. The combination of criminal charges, financial collapse, and now your lottery win, it's a volatile mix. I nodded, understanding the implications. Adam had lost everything that once defined his identity: professional standing, social position, financial security. Meanwhile, I, the wife he'd abandoned during cancer treatment, had not only survived but now possessed the wealth and freedom he'd sacrificed everything to pursue. It was, as Stella had said, cosmically perfect, and potentially dangerous. That evening, settled in a luxury hotel suite under a pseudonym, I watched local news coverage of my win. The convenience store owner beamed with pride at having sold the winning ticket. Neighbors offered quotes about my character and recent challenges. Financial experts discussed tax implications and statistical improbabilities. One segment featured a brief street interview with Adam, clearly ambushed by reporters outside my apartment building. His expression cycled rapidly between practiced charm and barely contained anger as he offered a tight-lipped no comment to questions about his estranged wife's sudden fortune. Watching him retreat to his car, pursued by cameras and microphones, I felt an unexpected twinge of emotion, not satisfaction or vindication, but a complex mixture of detachment and clarity. The man fleeing reporters bore little resemblance to the husband I'd once adored. His desperation was evident in every tense movement, every forced smile. My phone chimed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. We need to talk, please. Adam, reaching out directly despite pending legal proceedings. I forwarded the message to Caroline without responding, then turned off the television and drew the hotel room curtains against the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: lottery commission paperwork, trust establishment, security arrangements. But tonight, alone in the quiet of an anonymous hotel room, I allowed myself to fully absorb the day's extraordinary turn of events. Cancer had taught me life's fragility. Adam's betrayal had taught me love's impermanence. Now fate or chance or cosmic justice had delivered an unexpected third lesson: fortune's capacity to change everything in an instant. The irony wasn't lost on me. The numbers that had once commemorated milestones in my marriage had now funded my complete independence from it. The following morning brought a carefully orchestrated series of events that would permanently alter the trajectory of my life. At 9 a.m., Caroline and I arrived at the State Lottery Commission offices through a private entrance, avoiding the media gathered at the main doors. By 11 a.m., I had completed the necessary paperwork to claim my winnings through the newly established Phoenix Trust, named for the mythical bird that rises from ashes, a symbolism not lost on Caroline when I suggested it. Appropriate, she had commented with a small smile. Lottery officials confirmed what we already knew. After taxes, my winnings would amount to approximately $28.7 million. The funds would be transferred to the trust's accounts within 14 business days. As we left the commission offices, Caroline received a call from Adam's attorney. His voice was audible even without speakerphone, a forceful barrage of arguments about changed circumstances, and equitable distribution that Caroline listened to with professional patience before delivering her response. My client's position remains unchanged. The lottery winnings are her separate property, documented by legal affidavit filed well before the winning ticket was purchased. Furthermore, Mr. Sullivan abandoned Mrs. Sullivan during cancer treatment, emptied joint accounts, and is now facing criminal charges for fraud committed during their marriage. Her tone was calm, but resolute. The settlement offer expires at 5 p.m. today. After that, we proceed to court with full financial disclosure requests, including detailed investigation of any remaining assets from Mr. Sullivan's fraudulent activities. She ended the call and turned to me. They'll accept the offer. How can you be sure? Because they have no choice. Adam needs this divorce finalized before his criminal trial. A contentious divorce proceeding would only complicate his defense, strategy, and potentially reveal additional financial improprieties. Her confidence was unshakable. The lottery win doesn't change the legal reality of his position. She was right. At 4:37 p.m., Adam's attorney delivered signed settlement documents accepting our original terms, the house, the investment accounts, and my firm ownership all secured without any claim on my lottery winnings. The divorce would be finalized within 30 days, an expedited timeline facilitated by Adam's desire to simplify his legal battlefronts. My masterstroke, however, wasn't the lottery win, an event of pure chance despite its perfect timing. It came the following day, when I met with Assistant District Attorney Harrington to discuss my continued cooperation with the criminal case against Adam and Gemma. I've been thinking about their victims, I began, having rehearsed this conversation carefully. The investors they defrauded. Harrington nodded. Unfortunately, recovery of funds will be limited. Much of the money is gone, spent on lifestyle expenses or hidden in accounts we haven't yet located. What if I could help with that? I placed a document on his desk, a proposal I'd developed overnight with Caroline and my financial advisors. I'd like to establish a restitution fund for the verified victims, $3 million from my lottery winnings, distributed proportionally based on their losses. Harrington stared at the document, then at me, clearly stunned. That's extraordinarily generous, Mrs. Sullivan. But these weren't your crimes. You have no obligation to these people. I understand that, I replied. But I do have an opportunity to right a wrong that my husband committed. The victims deserve better than to have their life savings disappeared into Adam and Gemma's luxury lifestyle. What I didn't articulate, what Caroline had helped me understand during our late-night strategy call, was how this gesture would transform the narrative completely. No longer would I be simply Adam's abandoned wife who got lucky with a lottery ticket. Instead, I would become the woman who used unexpected fortune to help those her husband had harmed. The story broke that afternoon, not through an orchestrated press release, but through a genuine human moment. One of the defrauded investors, an elderly man who'd lost his retirement savings to Adam and Gemma's scheme, encountered me leaving the prosecutor's office. His daughter recognized me from news coverage of the lottery win. "You're her," she said, stopping me on the courthouse steps. The lottery winner, Adam Sullivan's wife. Ex-wife, very soon, I corrected gently. The man stepped forward, his expression a mixture of anger and despair. "Your husband took everything we had. 40 years of savings, gone." I met his gaze directly. "I know. And while I can't undo what he did, I've just established a fund to help repay those he harmed. You'll be hearing from the district attorney's office soon with details." Their shock was visible, the daughter's eyes filling with tears. A courthouse reporter, overhearing the exchange, approached for clarification. By evening, the story dominated local news. Lottery winner establishes $3 million fund for husband's fraud victims. It was the perfect counter to Adam's narrative, one I knew he would attempt, that I was heartlessly abandoning him in his time of need despite my newfound wealth. Instead, I had demonstrated compassion for strangers, while he had shown none for his own wife during her cancer battle. The Master. Stroke wasn't buying justice, it was reclaiming the narrative itself. The ripple effects of my lottery win and subsequent establishment of the Victim Restitution Fund spread far beyond my personal circumstances, touching lives in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Within days, the prosecutor's office reported a surge in cooperation from previously reluctant witnesses in Adam and Gemma's fraud case, many citing my actions as inspiration to do the right thing. Gemma's plea deal, already in negotiation, was hastily finalized, as her attorney recognized the shifting public sentiment. Her statement to prosecutors included damning details about Adam's role as the scheme's architect, portraying herself as a reluctant participant manipulated by his charm and promises. While the characterization was self-serving, it provided valuable evidence that further strengthened the case against Adam. The media narrative transformed completely. News stories that had initially focused on the irony of the abandoned cancer patient's lottery fortune now explored themes of justice and redemption. Profiles emerged depicting my journey from successful architect to cancer patient to philanthropist, each emphasizing resilience and generosity rather than victimhood or luck. What surprised me most was the wave of correspondence from complete strangers, cancer survivors sharing their stories of resilience, betrayed spouses finding inspiration in my refusal to be defined by abandonment, young women seeking advice on financial independence. Each letter or email represented a life touched by the public version of my story, an impact I hadn't considered when focused on my own healing and justice. Caroline organized the messages into categories, helping me send personal responses to those most meaningful while establishing a template for acknowledging the others. "Your story has resonated deeply," she observed one afternoon while reviewing the latest batch. "People see themselves in different aspects of what you've experienced." I nodded, still adjusting to this unexpected facet of sudden wealth and publicity. "I never intended to become a symbol of anything." "The most powerful symbols rarely do," she replied with characteristic insight. Adam's response to these developments came through multiple channels, each more desperate than the last. First, his attorney filed a motion to reconsider the divorce. Settlement, quickly denied by the judge who cited the clear documentation of the lottery ticket as separate property. Next came attempts to contact me directly, calls from unfamiliar numbers, messages through mutual acquaintances, even a handwritten letter delivered to the firm. I maintained absolute silence, following Caroline's advice that any direct communication could potentially be manipulated or used against me. Hank's surveillance reported Adam's increasingly erratic behavior, drinking heavily at midday, arguing publicly with his attorney, once even attempting to approach Stella outside her workplace before security intervened. "He's unraveling," Hank noted during our weekly security briefing. "His trial date is approaching, his financial resources are nearly depleted, and the evidence against him continues to mount." I received this information with the same detached concern I might feel for a troubled acquaintance, compassion without personal investment. The emotional ties that had once bound me to Adam's welfare had dissolved completely, replaced by a clear-eyed assessment of potential threats to my safety and peace. Meanwhile, my own life continued its process of reconstruction and redefinition. The divorce was finalized in a brief court proceeding that neither Adam nor I attended, our lawyers handling the formalities that legally ended our 10-year marriage. The lottery funds were transferred to the Phoenix Trust, with financial advisors implementing the carefully structured investment plan we'd developed. My medical status improved steadily, with Dr. Wilson officially moving me to quarterly checkups, rather than monthly treatments. "Your latest scans show no evidence of disease," she announced, genuine pleasure warming her professional demeanor. "While we'll continue monitoring closely for the next several years, I'd call this a medical success story." I celebrated this milestone quietly with Stella, Mark, and a few close friends who had remained steadfast throughout my ordeal. The dinner party, hosted at Stella's home rather than in public where media might intrude, featured simple food, good wine, and conversation that deliberately avoided mention of Adam, the lottery, or cancer. For one evening, we were just people enjoying each other's company, without the weight of extraordinary circumstances. The next morning, however, brought Adam's most direct attempt to reach me yet. As I left my apartment building for work, having moved from the temporary hotel to a secured residential complex recommended by Hank, Adam stepped from behind a parked car, his appearance shocking despite Hank's reports. Gaunt and unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes that bore little resemblance to his former impeccable style, he blocked my path to the waiting car where my security detail had momentarily stepped away. "Farrah, please," he began, his voice hoarse and desperate. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. 5 minutes to explain. I stopped, maintaining distance while assessing potential threat levels as Hank had trained me. Adam's posture was supplicant rather than aggressive, his hands visible and empty, his eyes bloodshot but focused. "There's nothing to explain," I replied evenly. "The divorce is final. Your trial is scheduled. Our connection is severed." "You don't understand," he insisted, taking a step closer before registering my immediate step back. "I made terrible mistakes, but Gemma manipulated everything. She pushed me to start the scheme, to leave when you got sick. I was weak, but she was calculating." My security detail appeared then, positioning themselves between us with professional efficiency. Adam raised his hands in a gesture of non-aggression, his attention still fixed desperately on me. "You have to help me, Farrah. The plea they're offering means prison time." "Prison? I can't." His voice broke, genuine fear flashing across his features. "I'm not built for that. You know me." That was precisely the problem. I did know him. The real Adam beneath the charming facade, the man capable of abandoning his wife during cancer treatment, the partner who had betrayed not just marriage vows, but basic human decency. "I need to get to work," I said simply, moving toward my waiting car. "Please don't approach me again. Any communication should go through our attorneys." "Farrah!" His voice rose as security guided me away. "You won the lottery! Millions! You could help me and never even feel it." The naked entitlement in his plea, the assumption that my good fortune somehow obligated me to rescue him from consequences, confirmed everything I'd come to understand about the man I'd once loved. Adam hadn't changed. He'd merely been stripped of the resources that had once allowed him to disguise his true nature. As my car pulled away, I caught a final glimpse of him in the side mirror. Shoulders slumped in defeat, the perfect image of a man facing the collapse of every privilege and protection he'd once taken for granted. The ripple effects continued, touching us all in different ways. Adam's trial began on a crisp autumn morning exactly 1 year after my cancer diagnosis. The symmetry wasn't lost on me as I entered the courthouse through a side entrance, guided by Hank and another security professional who had become a constant presence in my new life. I had no legal obligation to attend. My testimony had been recorded in depositions and would be presented without requiring my presence in the courtroom. Yet something within me needed to witness this final chapter, to observe firsthand as the full consequences of Adam's choices unfolded. The courtroom was crowded with media, legal professionals, and victims of the fraud scheme. I took a seat in the back row, deliberately inconspicuous despite the public fascination with my story. My appearance had changed significantly since the days of active treatment. My hair now a stylish pixie cut that worked with rather than against the new texture cancer had left me with, my weight restored to healthy levels, my wardrobe reflecting the confident professional I had reclaimed. Adam sat at the defense table, shoulders hunched beneath an ill-fitting suit that suggested further financial decline. He scanned the gallery continuously, perhaps searching for sympathetic faces among the many hostile ones. When his gaze finally found mine, The shock of recognition visibly rippled through him. Surprise, then desperate hope, then crushing disappointment. As my expression remained impassive, the prosecutor's opening statement was devastating in its methodical presentation of evidence. Emails between Adam and Gemma outlining their scheme. Bank records showing the movement of fraudulent gains. Testimony from victims who had lost retirement savings and home equity. And most damning, Gemma's comprehensive account of how Adam had orchestrated the entire operation, using her real estate connections while controlling the financial mechanics. During a brief recess, I stepped into the hallway for air, finding myself face to face with Adam's parents. I had always maintained cordial relations with them during our marriage, though never the warmth I'd shared with my own family. They looked older than I remembered, their faces etched with the strain of their son's public disgrace. "Farrah," his mother acknowledged, her voice small. We didn't expect to see you here. I needed to see it concluded," I replied simply. His father cleared his throat awkwardly. "We followed the news about your health, the lottery, the fund you established." He seemed to struggle for words. It was a decent thing, helping those people. The observation struck me as curiously detached, as though they were commenting on a stranger's actions rather than their former daughter-in-law's response to their son's crimes. Perhaps that emotional distance was necessary for them to reconcile the son they loved with the man being exposed in court. "Adam made choices," I said finally. "I've made mine." His mother's eyes welled with tears. "He was always such a good boy. We don't understand how this happened." I felt a flicker of compassion for these people caught in the crossfire of their son's moral collapse. They too were victims of Adam's deception, their understanding of their child fundamentally shaken. Sometimes we don't truly know people, even those closest to us, I offered, the hard-won wisdom of my journey evident in the gentle finality of my tone. Later that day, I watched from my quiet corner as Adam took the stand in his own defense, a risky strategy born of desperation. His testimony was a masterclass in deflection and minimal acknowledgement, admitting to errors in judgment and professional shortcuts while attempting to shift the most serious offenses onto Gemma's shoulders. The prosecutor's cross-examination dismantled this narrative methodically, using Adam's own emails, financial records, and prior statements to reveal the calculated nature of his actions. By the time he stepped down, his credibility lay in ruins alongside his reputation and career. I slipped out before proceedings concluded for the day, having seen what I needed to see. The transformation was complete, not just Adam's fall from grace, but my own evolution from the woman who had once built her life around his. The jury took less than 6 hours to reach their verdict. Guilty on all counts. I wasn't in the courtroom when it was announced, having said my silent goodbye to that chapter of my life the previous day. Instead, I was in a sunny conference room across town, finalizing plans for the Farrah Sullivan Foundation. The Victim Restitution Fund generated significant goodwill, my new philanthropic advisor explained, spreading concept documents across the polished table. A permanent foundation could build on that momentum while addressing causes you're passionate about. The foundation would focus on 3 areas close to my heart: cancer support for patients facing treatment without adequate family networks, financial literacy programs targeting women in vulnerable positions, and architectural scholarships for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The symmetry felt right, each program addressing an aspect of my journey, transforming personal trials into community resources. News of Adam's conviction reached me via text from Caroline, a simple message. Guilty all counts. Sentencing in 3 weeks. Call if you want details. I acknowledged receipt, but didn't request further information. The specifics of Adam's punishment, while once central to my sense of justice, now felt like footnotes to a story I was no longer actively writing. That evening, I returned to the lake cabin for the first time since claiming my lottery winnings. The familiar drive along winding roads triggered memories of my strategic withdrawal months earlier. How desperate and determined I'd been, seeking space to heal both body and spirit among the pines and quiet waters. The cabin looked smaller, somehow, though nothing had physically changed. Perhaps I was the one who had expanded, growing beyond the confines of the person who had sought refuge here. I settled on the screened porch with a glass of wine, watching daylight fade across the lake that had witnessed my transformation. My phone chimed with a message from Mark. Moreland project presentation approved unanimously. Client specifically praised your innovative resilience. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled, professional satisfaction warming me alongside personal contentment. The architectural firm continued to thrive under our joint leadership, my creativity, renewed and enhanced by experiences that had initially seemed purely destructive. Some of my best designs now incorporated elements of organic resilience and strategic adaptation, concepts I understood intimately from rebuilding my own life. The following week brought Adam's sentencing hearing. 8 years in federal prison, plus restitution payments that would follow him long after his release. The judge's comments were particularly pointed, noting the callous exploitation of trust and remarkable absence of genuine remorse evident. Throughout the proceedings, I received this news with a measured emotional response, neither vindictive satisfaction nor misplaced sympathy. Justice had taken its course, independent of my personal feelings. Adam would face consequences proportionate to his actions, while I continued building a life no longer defined by his betrayal. Gemma, having cooperated extensively with prosecutors, received a lighter sentence, 3 years plus probation. Our paths would never cross again, her name fading from relevance in my story apart from occasional legal updates from Caroline regarding restitution payments. As spring returned to the lake, I finalized plans for a new home, neither the modernist showpiece I'd shared with Adam, nor the rustic cabin of my recovery. Working with a talented young architect from our firm, I designed a space that honored both the strength I'd found in simplicity and the beauty I still valued in thoughtful design. The lakefront property, purchased quietly through the trust, would become my permanent residence and occasional retreat from a public life I hadn't sought, but now navigated with increasing confidence. The Foundation's first major initiative launched on the anniversary of my lottery win. A cancer support center offering practical, emotional, and financial resources to patients facing treatment alone. The ribbon-cutting ceremony, covered by local media, featured no mention of Adam or past betrayals, focusing instead on the transformative power of community support during life's greatest challenges. This center exists because I know firsthand how essential proper support is during cancer treatment, I told the small gathering. Sometimes the systems we depend on fail us. When that happens, we need to build new ones. The legacy I was constructing had evolved beyond reaction to betrayal, beyond even personal healing. It had become something generative and forward-looking, creating from experience rather than merely surviving it. 3 years after my cancer diagnosis, 2 years after Adam's abandonment, and 18 months after the lottery win that had transformed my circumstances yet again, I received a letter forwarded through Caroline's office. The prison return address told me its source before I even opened the envelope. Adam's handwriting had changed. Once confident and flowing, now cramped and hesitant on the institutional stationery. I considered discarding it unread, but some sense of completion urged me to at least acknowledge this final communication. Farrah, he began without preamble. I've had 2 years of federal prison to consider where my life went wrong. At first I blamed circumstances, then Gemma, then even you for not understanding the pressure I was under. It's taken this long to recognize the truth. I destroyed everything valuable in my life through my own choices, my own flaws, my own inability to be the man I pretended to be. The letter continued for 3 pages, neither asking for forgiveness nor offering excuses. Instead, It revealed someone finally confronting the reality of his character and actions without the defensive shields that had defined him. Whether prison had genuinely changed him or merely stripped away his capacity for self-deception, I couldn't determine. Perhaps the distinction didn't matter. I placed the letter in a file with other documents from that chapter of my life. Divorce papers, medical records, newspaper clippings about the trial. Not prominently displayed, but not discarded either. Part of a history I neither denied nor dwelled upon. That same afternoon, I met with the Foundation's board to review our expanded initiatives, including a new housing program for cancer patients traveling for specialized treatment. The conference room overlooked the city where my journey had unfolded. The hospital where I'd received my diagnosis visible in the distance. The courthouse where Adam had faced justice. The convenience store where a random lottery ticket had defied all odds. The 5-year survival statistics for patients with adequate support are significantly higher, Dr. Wilson, now a valued Foundation advisor, explained to the board. What we're creating here addresses a critical gap in cancer care. Later, walking along the lakeshore path near my new home, I reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had brought me to this point. The cancer that might have killed me, but instead revealed my strength. The betrayal that should have broken me, but instead freed me from an unworthy relationship. The lottery win that could have defined me, but instead became a tool for meaningful impact. None of these transformative events had been within my control. They were blows of fate, positive and negative, landing with arbitrary force. What I had controlled was my response to each, the meaning I assigned, and the direction I chose in their aftermath. My phone chimed with a message from Stella, including a photo of her daughter, my niece, proudly displaying an architectural drawing she'd created just like Aunt Farrah. The simple joy of this connection brought unexpected tears. Family, friendship, creative work, philanthropy. These were the true fortunes in my reconstructed life. As twilight settled over the lake, I watched a pair of ospreys return to their nest high in a pine tree near the water's edge. They had been there when I first arrived at the cabin during my illness, a testament to nature's resilience through seasonal changes and storms. Now they represented something profound about continuity amid transformation. The nest, repeatedly damaged by winter winds, rebuilt each spring. Fundamentally the same, yet subtly different with each iteration. I had survived cancer's cellular rebellion. I had endured Adam's devastating betrayal. I had managed the mixed blessing of sudden wealth with integrity and purpose. Each challenge had altered me. Each response had revealed me. Each rebuilding had strengthened me. The woman who had once defined herself as Adam's wife, as a cancer patient, as a lottery winner, now stood complete in her own right, architect, survivor, philanthropist, friend, sister, aunt, and most importantly, herself. Not defined by what had happened to her, but by what she had chosen to create from those happenings. The path forward stretched invitingly before me, no longer shadowed by illness or betrayal. I had emerged from the crucible of that terrible year, not just healed but transformed, carrying forward the wisdom gained without being weighed down by the pain that had birthed it. Some might call it karma that Adam now lived confined within prison walls while I enjoyed expansive freedom. Others might see cosmic justice in my financial windfall after his attempts to leave me destitute. But I recognized a deeper truth. The real victory wasn't in his punishment or my good fortune, but in the person I had become through it all. Person who could read his letter without rancor, who could build a foundation to help others through similar trials, who could appreciate an osprey's nest as a metaphor for her own resilient spirit. The setting sun cast long shadows across the water as I turned toward home, at peace with all that had been and all that might yet be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.